the energy in this room. That bodes well for what we're hoping to do here today. I'm Joyce Millen, and I'm very pleased to welcome you. I am a professor here at Willamette University, and I think I've probably been in correspondence with every single one of you in this room. So thank you so much for coming. We will talk about our aims and whatnot that we would like to accomplish today. But before we do that, I want to introduce you to what we've been fondly calling the SHERPE team. So SHERP stands for Sexual Health Education Research Project. And again, I'm Joyce, and this is?
My name is Sarah. I'm a sophomore student here at Willamette University, and I'm majoring in public health, and I've been a part of this project since last spring, and through the summer and this year.
Hi, I'm Mala Newman. I'm a senior here at Willamette University. I'm a public health major as well, and I am a new addition to the team this semester as I'm doing my capstone and thesis on sexual health education.
Hi, my name is Brad Barker. I'm a first-year student here at Willamette University. Hoping to graduate soon. No, Brad Barker retired after a 39-year career in global health, mostly in Africa, and came to Salem and started looking for something useful to do, and boy, I found it with this group. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Raina Myers, and I am the program coordinator for public health as well as many other departments, and I have been part of this SHERPES from the very beginning when it first started as a class. And I'll just kind of give you just a little brief instructions on where things are if you're not familiar with Willamette University. On the two sides of the lobby, the women's restroom is on, well, when you exit, it'll be on the right side, and then the men's is on the left, and then there is an all gender on the first floor if you need that as well. And if you need anything, the Willamette guest password is opportunity, all lowercase. And if you need anything else, I'm the person to ask, and I'll be more than happy to assist you. Thank you and welcome.
Okay. So we're going to do some brief introductions before we get to the really excellent part of today's activities. So to begin with, just a brief history of how we started this whole SHERPE thing. So about 5 years ago, in the spring of 2019, I was on the Communicable Disease Task Force Subcommittee on Sexual Health Education here at Marion County. And we were talking about the unfortunate elevation of sexually transmitted infections and a host of other problems. And we kept having the same conversation and over and over again each month about the problems. And so then we decided to figure out what is it that students or young people actually know, and in particular, what's being taught in schools. And so this is when we decided to go to the Oregon Department of Education. My background is in public health and medical anthropology, so I've never worked with education folks. But when you take a public health class, those of you who have done that, you might note that one of the first things you learn is public health is a team sport. And you can't do public health well unless you work intersectorally, cross disciplines and cross sectors, right? So we went to the Oregon Department of Education and met Sasha, and then Laura came on board. They are the 1.5 people, FTE, over at the Oregon Department of Education charged with sexual health education in the state of Oregon. Working with them, we started to get some classes involved in this research, and we had, at this point, 5 classes, almost 90-plus students involved in looking at 8 different school districts just in Marion and Polk counties, so limited to this area. But talking with parents and mostly teachers, really, but parents, teachers, some administrators, and others, and some graduated students about what they did learn or what they didn't learn, or what they're teaching or what they're not teaching. And basically, after year of doing this with my medical anthropology classes and public health classes, started to see the same data come back, the same results every time. And then, as a responsible scholar, we need to disseminate that information and weaponize it in a sense. So that's why we're here today, the effort to really utilize the data and to honor the fact that we can do better, and I think we're all here and we know that. So that's what today is about, essentially. We want to have discussions. We don't have any answers. We just have a sort of list of the problems. And the problems Sarah will explain a little bit in just a minute. Okay. Okay, so why are we gathered? I'm going to show you a little slideshow, 15 slides. I'm not even going to say anything about it. I just want you to read the slides on your own, and you'll gather what this is about. So in the news, this is just in the last year, or a little over a year, just snippets. So these are this took us very little time to find these, okay? We didn't do any kind of exhausted research at all. But this is just to give you an idea of some of the issues that we're contending with and thinking about. There you go. Thank you. Okay. So in the news, again, I'm not going to narrate. Just look at these carefully and read them. This wasn't in the news, but I figured it was something important to share, so hopefully you can read this. It says here, we are tracking 10 anti-trans bills in Oregon in 2023. The legislation impacts 4 categories, and this is from a website. Thought that would be important to share. Sobering. And again, this is a snippet of what we're addressing here today, just a tiny part of the issues that we would love to exhaust here today. So we are gathered for varying reasons, having to do with child, adolescent, young adult, and adult health and well-being, both physical and psychological well-being. To illustrate, Sarah will come up in just a minute to share with you the results of just one class worth of research from 2023. But I wanted to say just really quickly who's present here. So look around. If I name your organization, please stand up and wave to us, okay? So, and this isn't exhaustive, this is just a few. So we already have the Oregon Department of Education, Oregon Health Authority, Oregon Department of Human Services, Interface Network, HIV Alliance, Willamette Health Council, Liberty House, and there's a whole bunch more. So just to give you a sense, and you will all have access to the members of our audience here, okay? Just to give you a sense of who is present. So with that, just a really quick thought about the aims of the symposium. We aim to explore all small and large ways and means to improve the teaching of health and sexual health in particular here in Oregon, in all Oregon schools. We are recording the symposium today, and we will have an edited version of it available to share with colleagues around the state. So again, this is just a first discussion, and at the end of the symposium here today, we will figure out together if we need to have a larger symposium or larger meeting of sorts to perhaps exhaust some of the issues, some of the ideas, some of the things that we covered today. Please look in your folders. In the folders, you'll see some documents prepared by our wonderful public health students, Sarah and Mala, who you just met a second ago. That should be helpful. Those are works in progress, as it says at the beginning. But I want to draw your attention to the post-symposium survey. Please look at that now and have some ideas how to answer these questions before you leave here today, okay? So you have pens and whatnot. We will hopefully finish 10 minutes early so you can fill these out. Our hope is that you fill them out here before you leave, okay? And based on the reflections that you have from today's discussions, okay? All right, and with that, I'd like to pass it to Sarah.
Okay. I was one of the students who took Professor Millen's medical anthropology class. I took it last spring, and we did a project called SHERP, where 17 students conducted interviews in 8 school districts in Marion and Polk counties. We interviewed key players like health teachers, the principals, vice principals, concerned parents, students if they were over the age of 18, and any other kind of person at the school. And we kind of asked, what are some challenges that you face in teaching sexual health education? And then each student wrote an executive summary kind of summarizing those challenges and recommendations that the interviewee made to improve this sexual health education. My summer internship was pretty much looking through all of the executive summaries that were written by my classmates and kind of analyzing and dissecting that and kind of grouping up different themes to realize what were themes that were common throughout all of these interviews, because there were many. Because school districts some were huge, some were small, but they all faced different or similar challenges. This work matters to me and my peer group because most of us, probably all of us, feel like our experience with health education was insufficient. We come from all sorts of different backgrounds around the country, but most of us feel like that health education is extremely important and it's overlooked. And health education is important for many aspects of life, including building healthy relationships and consent. It's more than just like sexual behavior, yeah. So when I was analyzing the executive summaries, we realized that 7 out of 8 school districts said that one of the main challenges they faced were teachers feeling untrained or underqualified and uncomfortable teaching a lot of the topics that were required by the standards. And teachers felt like they do not have enough adequate professional development opportunities. And also 4 out of 8 districts reported that they need more health education resources, such as speakers and specialists. And there we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Just to add, another part of the research Sarah did as an intern over the summer was to examine the websites of the school districts in Marion and Polk counties. And that was really illustrative, just to show how vastly different the different websites were. And shout out to Woodburn. We gave Woodburn the highest marks for having a transparent website that taught parents and students precisely what they would be learning. And we will have a wonderful representative from Woodburn on our panel this afternoon, or today, to talk about the exemplary Woodburn School District in this regard. Now, I have the great honor of presenting to you someone who just arrived, Oregon State Senator Deb Patterson. Senator Patterson represents District 10, which includes South and West Salem, Monmouth, Independence, parts of Four Corners, and unincorporated East Salem. Senator Patterson has had an illustrious career prior to becoming a state senator. She served for more than 20 years in healthcare administration, including as executive director of the International Parish Nurse Resource Center, which equips RNs to provide health care and resources throughout the world, and as executive director of Northwest Parish Nurse Ministries. She also held a position on the senior management team of a multi-hospital health system in the Midwest. Senator Patterson has served on a variety of governing boards for health and human service organizations, including for hospitals, transitional housing, residential care, outdoor programs. She chaired the Marion County Health Advisory Board, served on the Oregon Disabilities Commission, and on the Oregon Nursing Home Administrators Board. In addition, she held several appointed positions, including with the Oregon Commission on Women, the Governor's Commission on Senior Services, the Oregon Hunger Task Force, the Oregon State Capitol Foundation, and Oregon's Autism Task Force. Currently, as Oregon State Senator, she is chair of the Senate Health Care Committee, co-chair of the Ways and Means Subcommittee, and a member of the Senate Business and Labor Committee and the Senate Housing Committee. Senator Patterson earned a Master of Health Administration from Washington University of Medicine in St. Louis and a doctorate from Eden Theological Seminary. Senator Patterson is bringing her considerable experience and talent to the Oregon Senate, working tirelessly to make healthcare, housing, and childcare more affordable, expand employment options such as apprenticeship opportunities, help small businesses to recover, and support clean energy jobs that pay living wages. Senator Patterson is mom to 2 young adults, one of whom has special needs, and wife to Dr. Stephen Patterson, who holds the George H. Atkinson Chair of Religious and Ethical Studies at Willamette University. We are so honored to have Senator Patterson here with us today to participate in our discussion, and right now to welcome and introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you so much, Professor Millen, and I'm so glad for this little stool that's up here, too, so thank you. And it truly is an honor to be here today to participate in this symposium, and thank you to all the hosts and to all those who will be presenting and to everyone who's taken time to be here today to discuss this important healthcare issue. It is indeed my honor to introduce Senator Claire Wilson. She is remarkable. I had a chance to visit with her over dinner last night, which was really a joy. She has represented the people of the 30th District in Washington State, which is around the Federal Way area and beyond. She is in her second year as chair of the Human Services Committee and is, I'm right, I'm at the age where I'm between glasses and not, so that's why I was like, okay. I'm going to move this a little bit. She is in their second year as chair of the Human Services Committee and is proud to serve as vice chair of the Early Learning and K-12 Committee. She's also a member of the Transportation Committee, Rules Committee, and holds the role of Assistant Majority Whip. Senator Wilson is a strong proponent of reform in the juvenile justice, child welfare, and correction systems. She's motivated to disrupt the institutions, and you're going to hear that in her speech today. She's a wonderful disruptor she's making good trouble. She helps to keep people where they are and and embrace them as who they are, and then provide them with the tools and resources that they need for successful reentry. And she's also, for example, here's an example. She's sponsored legislation ending the use of solitary confinement for youth. I mean, solitary confinement for anyone is torture. Can you imagine how much worse it is for youth in their social development of needing that socialization? As well as providing a bill, providing post-secondary education opportunities in the Department of Corrections and more. You'll need to ask her about that. There's much more. She's also the force behind major education legislation. She sponsored Senate Bill 5395, which requires all Washington public schools to provide comprehensive sexual education. We need to stop and clap for that. Thank you. She also championed the landmark Fair Start for Kids Act, which invested $1.1 billion to make childcare and early learning more affordable for Washington families. Yeah, that's worth applauding too. Because little kids don't have a lobby, do they? Before her time in the legislature, Claire spent 25 years serving as an administrator in early education and family involvement at the Puget Sound Educational Services District. Prior to that, she taught pregnant and parenting teens at Mount Tacoma High School and was a program director for the Women, Infants, and Children Supplemental Food and Nutrition Education Program in a rural community in Montana. She's also served as an elected school board director for Federal Way Public Schools for 8 years. Throughout her career, Senator Wilson has served on numerous boards and organizations in Washington state and now serves on several national public policy boards, from the National Conference of State Legislators to the Council of State Governments. Senator Wilson identifies as a lesbian woman and mother and is one of 7 LGBTQ lawmakers in the Washington State Legislature. She is a fierce advocate for early learning and care and for whole person autonomy and integrity, helping people of all ages fully realize their worth and potential. It is my great honor to welcome and introduce Senator Claire Wilson.
I love it. We're all short. All of us are short. And you know, when you meet people on Zoom, you don't know how tall they are until you meet them, and then you realize you're eye to eye. So thanks so much. And it's absolutely wonderful to be here today and to have met some of you last night at dinner to kind of find out what the scope of the world is here in Oregon. And although we're neighbors, you never know what's going on. And I know you just finished a legislative session, and so did we. And so there's always new things, I think, swirling around and trying to figure out what actually lands. So today, I'm here to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and I'm not going to say it's sex. I'm going to say it's comprehensive sexual health education, because that's what it is, CHE. I think we get stuck on those first 3 letters, SEX, and then we never get beyond that. So as you heard, I've been a state senator for 6 years, and I started my work in this area not around sexuality, just around kids and families many years ago. And so I think for myself as a career educator, I've seen for a long time the effectiveness that comprehensive programs have and how they can change the lives and the trajectory of not only children but of families as well. And I think this is so important right now when we talk about this, helping young people especially kind of figure out what their own personal health journey is and how they can become their true selves, their full selves, and be valued and valuable regardless of who they are and how they present themselves. As you heard, for 10 years, I taught 11 to 21-year-old pregnant parenting teens. So 11 is 5th grade. No 5th grader should be a parent. And no 5th grader is usually a parent because it's consensual. And so there's lots of reasons to do this, and we can spend all the money in the end on the intervention, or we can talk about prevention. So first and foremost is why I live in the world of early learning, because our return on investment is so much more important there. And if we actually gave people what they needed from the very beginning, we wouldn't be where we were right now. And that we have inequities in our systems and our institutions that have been there forever. And I'm a white woman, and I walk with privilege, and I know that. And I use that privilege every day, you know, not to be a voice for other people, but to create space for the voices that have never been there. But I also identify, as you heard. And so I can choose to walk in a room and disclose. And many of you in this room don't have that choice. The minute you walk in a room, the minute you open your mouth, the minute you say anything, the minute somebody looks at you, they already have decided your worth and your value, and whether you need the information they have to give or not, and whether you're worthy of the resource or worthy of the support. And so my job as a disruptor, because I know those institutions exist, and they've never been there to get people out of them. They've been there to keep people right where they were. And they've also been there just to let people know just enough about what they need to get out, but not enough to give them that to get them out of the situation they're in. And I also believe it's not my checkbook, it's our checkbook. And as we think about our state and we think about resources and supports, it's our money. And especially when I work with incarcerated individuals and individuals who have been system involved, child welfare involved, it's their money too. And all of us deserve to have those resources and supports. And if we did that, again, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in. But we have folks that have never had generational wealth, they've never had access to anything, and then we wonder why we're where we are today. There is no wonder. There's reasons why we are. And now the job is, what are we going to do about it? Because once you know something, then you need to do something about it. And that's what I hear. You know what you know, and now what are we going to do to change what we know? I also sat on school board for 8 years, and I'll tell you, I left my school board position because of the comprehensive sex ed bill. I had said to my school board, I was in my 8th year, and I had won my election, and I told my superintendent and my board directors when I dropped that bill my first year, if it was going to change any of the conversations or any of my role as a school board president at the time in my district, that I would remove myself from the board, because it was not a school district issue, it was a state issue. And so when I appeared at my school board after I dropped the bill, and there were almost 500 people wanting to speak, it was at that meeting that I resigned. And I first allowed all members to have public comment, and then I said, thanks so much for your concern. I'm going to officially resign my position as president, and I'd like you all to join me and follow me down to Olympia, because this is not the place you need to be. Federal Way's been doing comprehensive sex ed for years. 50% of our school districts were doing it already. We were just trying to reach the other 50% that weren't doing anything. And we saw rates of STIs, we saw rates of teen pregnancies, we saw rates, as you saw, of things that were going up because we hadn't paid any attention. So my interest also comes because I'm a mom of 2 kids. I have a 24 and a 26-year-old who went through public school, and I care deeply about them, and I care deeply about their trajectory and their life. And then I also identify, and in all of my years, I'm 67 years old, nobody said ever one word about what if. Like, what if I don't like boys? What if I don't like boys? 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, even as an adult teaching, nobody ever asked me. But I also wasn't comfortable to tell anybody either. We have to have these kinds of conversations because, again, I want to be my true self and my whole self, and everyone else wants to be that as well. I knew the value of effective sexuality because of my work with teens every single day. You know, I said last night that one of the biggest questions always was, how do you pee with the diaphragm in? And these are young women that were pregnant, okay? And so when you don't know about how your body operates, it's like I can tell you everything about my head, I can tell you everything about my arms, I can tell you everything about my chest, I can tell you everything about my legs, my hands, my feet, my toes, my ears, my eyes. But that other part, we'll just take that and put it aside. No. And that's what kids do, because that's what we do. We kind of separate it. Doctors say, they don't say I don't do left arms. Doctors do entire bodies. You go over here to get your left arm taken care of. We're whole people, and so we have to be able to kind of think about that and talk about that. And then we don't like to talk about it as parents, right? Oh my God, because if we say it, they're going to do it. And then if you have a parent that doesn't want to talk about it, or you don't talk about those kinds of things, where do you get your information? Either from your friends or the street, or from a trusted source of information. The street and your friends do not give you good information, you know that. And either does Google, by the way. You really need to have a trusted partner. Public schools and schools are that place. The only cost to get in is your age. And if I don't have a mom, a dad, a significant person, and a trusted adult in my life, an older sister, an aunt, where do I go to get my information? Trusted, and I trust the fact that probably what you do get if you have no one like that is probably information that's going to lead you to the wrong place, right? And my daughter went to Planned Parenthood. We talk about this all the time. People go, she goes to Planned Parenthood. I'm like, yeah, because she can get health care there too. She's just not going there. People just don't go there because they're want to have a baby or get rid of a baby, right? They go there for health care, reproductive health, all those kinds of things. And to walk through a parking lot and have people show her, molds and forms of fetuses. And when she's like, they don't even know why I'm going there, right? That's unconscionable, because we're also keeping young people away from the very service and support they're trying to get, but they don't have access to. And so it's important to young adults as well. So Sex Ed for All is kind of what we're talking about. So I thought I'd show you just a bunch of slides at first of what our adventure was, if you will, I'll say, in Washington. And Planned Parenthood was a big partner in that. And I dropped the bill 2 years. The first year it didn't go. It was my first year as a state legislator. Nobody told me what you should or shouldn't do because, never been in the House before. And in the Senate, we're kind of like independent contractors, so you just do whatever. Nobody told me I should talk to the chair of the Education Committee in the House where the bill would be going to let her know it was coming. Nobody told me I needed to do any of those things, and I just do what's right. So, of course, I dropped this bill, and then OMG. All of these people showed up, and what happened in my community, the gentleman I beat, was very much not a proponent of anything I am or anything I've ever stood for or anything I believe in. Totally the opposite. Never had written a piece of legislation that supported me or who I was or the 120 dialects and individuals who live in my community, right? We have a very diverse community. And so when I beat him, he was kind of pissed off. And but he would never come in front of the Senate because I sat on the committee. He would have to testify in front of on the bill. So what he did was he would bring all of his folks over to the House. So the House had all of the issue because he didn't want to sit in front of me because that's this power differential, and I'm there and he's down there. So he decided he was going to use the House to hold his power. But our pink shirts kind of overtook both the House and the Senate, and I think it's pretty appropriate. Had a lot of young people, and we had teen councils, and at Planned Parenthood, the teen councils here are incredibly wonderful, and they were very much individuals who moved this bill forward. The other thing, we had this thing called the pandemic, right? And we learned about virtual testimony. So the other piece about this, and I don't know if you've got that in Oregon or not, but we've held on to virtual testimony. So we were able to then garner and gather voices from all across the state, from our teeniest, tiniest, smallest communities that tend to be more conservative to Seattle, where everybody, believes people are having probably sex out in the parks and in the streets because that's how radical they are. But together, we had a voice and we had a presence. What we also found was that 60% of the folks were, as a matter of fact, in favor of. And remember, not always the voices that are the loudest are the ones that are the majority, and they may not always vote either. They just may want to yell. They oftentimes don't come with solutions, just with more loud voices. And so we felt like we just needed to continue to pursue because it was the right thing to do for the right reason. Then we had the other side, and the other side who said that we were grooming children, that we were turning everyone into LGBTQ trans. I was telling them at dinner, I was known as the person who wanted to remove penises of young children coming into school because of how I walk this world and what I thought. And they talked about school porn. They talked about all kinds of things. We're very much not happy at all about where we were, and they felt like we were not allowing children to be children. So here's what I'm thinking my job is for you today. So one is to hopefully you'll feel a bit inspired. And I can tell you a little bit about the blocks we went through and also the fears that people had. Hopefully you'll walk away with some new ideas and strategies, not just from me, because I know y'all are working this afternoon, and so by the end of the day. Wanted to share with you some of the past and proposed legislation that has come since, because even though you pass a bill, it doesn't mean it's done. So we've continued to have to fight and to bring further legislation forward to keep our work moving. And want to give you time to wonder aloud and get your questions answered. So the Washington State curricula on health and sex education was inconsistent from school district to school district. Like I said, we had about 50% of our districts that were doing sex ed, but what they were doing was all over the map. And as you also probably know, a lot of the curricula focused just specifically on abstinence. And even though studies show that abstinence-only curricula doesn't result in fewer teen pregnancies, and it doesn't result in fewer STIs, it seems to be the fact, just don't do it. And it was always interesting, especially with my teen parents, that their parents continued to want to say, just don't do it. And I said, they've done it already. So if I say to you, just don't do it, can you say, okay, I'll stop? No, once you do it, it's like, now what are we going to do? And some folks do stop, right? Some young people, not for me, especially if it's not chosen, if it's not consensual. But there are others that, it's like it is, you have to deal with what we're going to deal with. And, I don't want my daughter to have sex, but if she's going to have it, I don't want her to have a baby. And I also don't want her to get an STI. And I also don't want her future to be limited because of a decision that she made without the ability to foresee kind of the impact that's going to have on her moving forward in her future. And because I said yes, and because I told her about that, and because it's important to me to share that with her, that doesn't mean she's going to go out and have sex with everyone. But it means that if she makes that choice, she's got another voice in her head that's mine, right? That says to her, there may be something else you might want to choose to do, or there may be some things you want to do to get ready or to be prepared. So the outcome is the one that you could have. In 2019, again, was the first time I dropped the bill. And it passed all the way through the Senate because why wouldn't it? All my friends were there, and they believed like I did. And then it died when it got to the House. And so I reintroduced the bill in 2020 because that was the important thing for me. One and done doesn't always happen, and many bills take years to get through, as you see in your own work here in Oregon. And so it did make it over the finish line, and the governor did sign that bill, but not after 220 amendments came to the floor, and there was a debate on the House floor that went from 10 in the morning till 2 a.m. And I was telling Sarah last night, many of those 220 amendments had vegetables connected to them, and fruits, if you can imagine, yes. Like bananas, cucumbers, what thou shalt and shall not have in classrooms related to tools for teaching sex ed. I mean, are you kidding me? And so out of those 220 amendments, we were able to cut about 100 of them that were absolutely, there's a rule that you can do where you can trim amendments that absolutely mean nothing and don't do anything. So out of those 220, we actually had to debate 120 of them on the floor, and I sat on my and the Senate side, we were having our own debates, and I sat at my desk, and every time a House member stood up and spoke to the bill, I wrote a thank you note. And so by the time we were done in the Senate that night, the House was still going, and I had like a stack of notes, and I went over to the House and literally gave them to the pages to pass out to my members and my D members and my members who stood up to speak in support of, because it was that important that I didn't want them to lose sight of who we're doing it for and why we're doing it. And, you know I'm also among friends here when I say that issues around sex and sexuality bring a lot of passion and fervor on both sides of the debate, right? And so this is not a conversation you have that's boring, usually in a room, I'll just say that. So here we go. So one of the biggest challenges was the myths that kept coming out, right? So some of them were, and the things that we did, where we're focusing on what the bill does not do is critical in response to the host of allegations about what the bill did do. So, that whole idea of don't go off of their message, stick to your message. What is it? Not what it isn't, but what is it? Because we heard things like this new law was going to require us to teach sex ed for kindergartners, or we're going to teach porn to kids in elementary school. How do you teach affirmative consent in kindergarten? By heaven's sakes, kids need to be safe, but this is a misguided policy. Well, no, kindergartners don't learn about sex, but they do learn about body autonomy, and they do learn about good touch, bad touch, and they do learn about stranger danger, right? Those are the social emotional kinds of skills that will allow someone to say yes or to say no. No, thank you, I don't want you to hug me today. No, thank you, I would rather not sit on your lap, right? Those are those kinds of things. Parents had really strong beliefs and really strong feelings, and I think it's really important they're heard, because it's either to dispel what it is they're thinking we're going to teach, or it's really hearing what their concerns are and then being able to address them. And I'll also say, if you have, and I know you do, you have Oregon Pre-K here, and you have Head Start here. And I don't know if you know it, but both of those programs in their program standards require curricula on, I'm so glad you asked, talking about touching, all these kinds of things. And I was like floored, because we suddenly moved kids into kindergarten after it's a requirement, pre-K, to teach this. And then they get into kindergarten and someone in the world is saying, we cannot talk about this anymore. So as an alignment issue, preschoolers are learning this. And so how is it that we're aligning that and we're taking that trajectory and we're looking at it developmentally, because it needs to be developmentally appropriate, and at the age and stage where kids are. And that's what schools do best, right? Scope and sequence. That's what they do. And so it's really important that we have both education and public health here together, because I think that's the way. I also will just say off the cuff that, one of the issues around teachers being comfortable teaching the matter, especially when we talk about LGBTQIA plus young people and non-binary youth and kind of the fluidity and all those kinds of things. If you have a health education teacher, that's great. If you don't, and you're trying to figure out how you're getting somebody else to teach it, you might not look inside your school. You might look outside. Health educators, you might look at public health, you might look at some of your other organizations that work with young people that do this on a daily kind of a basis that might come in. And the other thing that does is provide resource and access for young people and their families outside of the school setting. So they actually know where in their community to go to get the very services that we're talking about young people might need. It's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing to say, well, I can't get it out of a book. Where do I get it in my community? So I'm a cross-sector, cross-system kind of a person. Early learning doesn't live in an institution. K-12 is an institution, government's an institution, and one of the things that we need to be thinking about is how it is we bring that cross-system sector piece of work and how we bring people into our schools to become part of that greater community and actually provide some of that resource. And then if a teacher is totally uncomfortable, that teacher shouldn't be teaching that, just gonna say it. You know? We had an issue in the state where we wanted to integrate and infuse because we didn't want to add another credit for kids to have to learn. But then parents were freaked out because then they didn't know how they could track. How do I know when you're teaching sex ed in my business class? You know, it's like, well, okay, no, we'll just do sex ed. But we do have a health curriculum. We do have health care and health teachers. In our middle school, a little bit different. And in elementary, a little different as well. But, you know, thinking about that, education and the education system, there are other experts that could come in and be those experts for you, and that schools can focus on academics and those things, but it's the place where kids come. It's a place where they're usually comfortable. It's a place that they call community. It's like their home in their neighborhood. And so going somewhere else and going outside is a difficult thing, but coming in and inviting community in is the best thing. If you've heard of full-service schools, that's what this is. And again, it's a great resource, access resource for kids. It's also about safety and it's about health. So again, most people get stuck on the SEX part of it, but that's more than that. It is about personal health. It's about life decisions. It's about medical and economic consequences. It's about consent. And it's being safe from predatory behaviors. And the need for this is statistically borne out. We know that. I'll tell you the affirmative consent is in the legislation in the state of Washington. And that came from a group of young men who came to visit me who were higher ed student lobbyists. And we were having this conversation around this comprehensive sex ed. And they were talking about how do you say no after you said yes? And like they didn't know how to do that. And they were afraid. And then they were afraid going to college when you add drugs and alcohol, because you do. If they didn't know and didn't have a skill and were never taught that, and then you add drugs and alcohol to a situation, it exacerbates the outcome, right? And so it was so important for them because they didn't get any of those things. And they think about that now when they're at frat parties and when they're doing their thing and they see their colleagues and some of their friends with behaviors that they don't know how to change, and they want to. And that's affirmative consent. It's like, how can you, it is okay to say no. I don't care where you are, how far along you are on any trajectory. No means no. And so as young men, it was incredibly important for them, and they did have a fear, and they wanted to know more, and they wanted to learn about how to do that and when to do that. And they wanted to know that in the context of a conversation with young women, because when young men talk about it together, they don't get both sides, right? And we have very different ways of operating, different ways of processing information, different ways of hearing it. And so those conversations and why role modeling and why role playing is so important. And people think it's kind of crazy. And one of the things parents wanted to do was opt their kids out of any role plays. It's like, whatever. But role plays are what give you the words, right? If you've never practiced it, it was like, you don't just pull it out of nowhere. And so, you know, those are the kinds of things we need to listen to our young people. They are telling us what they need. The faith community was hugely important for us. Any of you familiar with the OWL curriculum? OWL? So OWL curriculum is curriculum that's used, in many of our religious communities. And I have an OWL trainer in my community who I love dearly, who is at one of our churches, and she also travels to third world countries, and she teaches OWL training in third world countries, and we can't even do it here in the state of Washington or in Oregon. It's crazy. So, and that's that's religious. There's a religious take to this. It isn't about not being religious and not having values and not having morals and all those kinds of things, but it is about learning about your body. And it's learning about, again, what happens. And the fact is that parents can always opt their children out. And I believe in Oregon the same is true. But I'll tell you this, we did something called the Health Impact Review, and that's our Board of Health does research on any kind of piece of legislation you can ask them to do. So I asked them to do research, health impact review on the comprehensive sex ed bill as it was dropped. And it came back, they do a long summary, and then they do an executive summary with findings. And all the findings were great, except for one. And that was for parents who opted their children out of the program, out of the curricula, that they would have, there's no positive impact for them. But for young people, lower STDs, lower incidence of teen pregnancies, higher incidence of self-efficacy, of futuring, of prolonging sexual activity, except if your parents opt you out. Something that parents need to know and they need to hear more about. Even after the law was passed, we had a little challenge called referendum. So in our state, if people don't like the bill or a law, they do referendum. So we had something called Referendum 90, and the signature gathering happened at the height of the pandemic. And fortunately, they got enough, well, there we go. Wait a minute. Okay, let's just do this. Teach us anything, young people will pursue sexual experiences. Again, people are gonna do what they're gonna do, regardless of what we tell them. So it's important to tell them what we want them to hear and we want them to know. And that holds at any demographic, any income level, any place. We also wanna make sure kids make good choices and that information's power. And we have a belief that if they know something, they're gonna do something. But if they know something, you know, they might do something different with what they know. So information is power, it's important. And again, it's the right thing to do, and it's the right time to do it. So here's what happened. So we dropped the bill, the Senate Bill 5395, which is the one that actually passed the governor's desk, on the 7th of March. And on the 13th of March in 2020, the group that loves me so much dropped Referendum 90. And in the 27th, so it all happens all at the same time, the governor signed the bill into law. And on June, they filed the referendum. Then on June 10th, they were able to gather the signatures that they needed, but they did that by standing in lines at the food banks and places that were passing out the computers and the foods. Remember, this was during the pandemic. And so they very strategically went to every place people would stand and be in line for hours waiting for things and just got people to sign their referendum. And that's how they gathered enough signatures. And they brought the boxes to the state as they do. It was certified on the 24th of June. And then, so there was either pro or against, and so it was no on Referendum 90 was the group that wanted to get rid of the sex ed bill, comprehensive sex ed, and the referendum, yes on Referendum 90 was our group that wanted it to pass. And so on November 3rd, it passed, which continued to tell us that overwhelmingly across the state, people want this to happen. That was the reject Referendum 90, protect local control and parental control, big deals for them. And we wanted to keep kids safe and healthy, and that was our goal for that bill. The other thing is people felt like the sky was gonna fall when we did this, right? Like, we're gonna do this and we're gonna have kids having sex everywhere, this is just gonna be horrible. And so we had to remember, and we had to think back and remind people of the other big changes we've made, that the sky didn't fall. And that was when we passed prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. We did that in 2006. 2009, domestic partnerships, we did that. 2012, legalized same-sex marriage, we were able to do that. And the curriculum the bill required, again, had been taught in so many of our schools, so it wasn't that it was new, it was the idea that we wanted all of our young people to have this, and none of the kids that had been getting it, the sky had not fallen, and their districts were still whole, and their families were still whole, even though they got this information. We also, like I said, talked to a lot of young people because they're who and they're why we're doing this work. And one of the big questions we asked them was what their hope for the next generations of students were who were going to be able to benefit from this legislation. And every single one of them, that they will never go through what we went through. Many of these women have stories and shared their stories. Again, dates, first time they've gone out with boys, and things that happened to them that they didn't know, either throughout their lifetime or in their experiences and relationships. It was really, really emotional for them, but also so important because what they understood is what they didn't know would have made a difference. And we hear that from young people every day. If I had only known this, if I'd only known that, if I'd only known that. And think about that because they do want to know. And if you're not going to tell them, they're going to go find out another way. And I think we want to make sure the way they find it is the best way and the right way. They wanted to learn how to protect themselves. They wanted to break the stigma and be able to talk about sexuality and to talk about things that were not secrets. And again, many of us, myself included, grew up in families. My mom's German. You didn't say those kinds of things. You never talked about that stuff. You just didn't. You didn't. I mean, I remember her drawing a picture of, women having periods. I have 3 older sisters, and it was like a stick figure. And it was like, I don't ever remember having those kinds of conversations, right? And do you? And if you do, yay. But if not, where do we learn this stuff? And it shouldn't be by guess, right? It should be planful. And that they hoped students would notice a difference. This past session, and this is again what it's all about, that's who we're doing this for. The past session, we had 6 initiatives that were gathered in our state to be put on the ballot, much like the referendum 90. And one of them was a parental rights initiative. It hasn't gone away, I'll just tell you that. So within this parental rights initiative, it was $6 million a gentleman dropped to drop the 6 initiatives. And they gathered 440,000 signatures, which is less than 2% of population, so very small, but 400,000 or 440,000 sounds really like a lot when you hear that number. And the bill is, it deals with 15 parental rights. And as you can imagine, one of them is comprehensive sex ed and opting out, which they already can do. So what we realized in the initiative with the 15 parental rights they called out is 90% of those are already in state or federal law. And the things we were most critically concerned about were issues related to reproductive health care, gender responsive care, mental and behavioral health care for young people. And all of those things, the HIPAA and FERPA laws, superseded what they had written in the initiative. But the issue with the initiative was that if we let it go to the ballot and we let it go for a vote, and it focused a lot on LGBTQIA+ and trans youth, which was devastating for my community and my population, and they didn't want us to pass this initiative. But we also knew we didn't have money from the outside, and we didn't have the power nor the people to fight that initiative. And so if the initiative went to the people and it passed, we wouldn't have been able to do anything with it for 2 years. We couldn't touch it. But by passing it off the floor of the House and the Senate, as it was written, which was the most horrible thing to have to do, it allows us to come back immediately during special session or during regular session to make any kind of legislative changes we need should we see that young people are being harmed by the outcome of that bill. And so we passed it off the floor of the Senate and passed it off the floor of the House. And with the initiative, it's not a governor-signed bill. It immediately goes into effect. Goodness about that is kids are not, it won't go into effect till July 1. Kids are out of school. Then kids don't come back into school until September. And so we have a period of time to keep our eyes open and to watch what's going on. And I have a bill that I dropped last session that sits in ways that'll be pulled back out for early action next session immediately already. And it's when school boards and school districts blatantly disregard state law. And I had it getting ready for some of the other legislation I had done around inclusive curricula and such. And so that one will be ready to go so that just in case we have one of our 294 or 2 or 5 or 10 of our 294 school districts that make some decisions that go against our state law around protected classes and such, that we will immediately have a process and a way to do that. We also put budget money in our budget for OSPI, our Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, to increase their auditing of school district policies across the state, which they will be doing with fervor to make sure that that happens. And then the third thing we did is we're putting in a hotline and haven't decided whether it's going to go into the Office of the Education Ombuds or whether it'll go into the LGBTQ Commission Office as a hotline number so that parents and folks can call should, again, things be happening in their districts that go against issues related to the protected class because of the initiative. And I say that because much of the stuff that you're going to hear, especially around comprehensive sex ed, has to do with sexuality. And it has to do with our trans kids, it has to do with our non-binary kids, it has to do with young people who are challenged and struggling to find themselves. And adults not knowing what to do and how to handle it. And so their fears then become everybody's fears. And I guess the problem for me is that that's okay, but it's not okay for my kids, right? You can do whatever you want. Take your kids out. If you don't feel like they want to, I mean, unfortunately, that as a parental person, you have that right. But you don't have that right to do that for the 29 other kids that I know who need this and want this. And that's the part I think that's such a challenge because, and I said last night, remember as adults, remember growing up in your house, everybody thought your house was like everybody's house, right? You remember the first time you went to like a friend's house or a neighbor's house or you went to school or something and you're like, whoa, their grandma lives with them. That is weird. Or people would say to me, like, why do you eat dinner at 1 o'clock on Sunday? And I'm like, I don't know, we just do, right? Everybody's different. And remember the first time you realized that? Now I sit in the Senate floor with all these adults. They forget. I'm like, what happened? We are all not alike. What did you forget? The fact is, I'm not like you. There are some things we have alike, but we are all not alike. And why suddenly did you forget it was okay to be different, right? Different's not wrong. Different is just other than. And so, you can legislate all you want, but you can only legislate for yourself and your child. You can't legislate for everyone else. And I would say that as a parent, when I was on the school board, as a parent, I'm going to advocate for my kid, and I'm going to advocate as best I can. When I'm on the school board, it isn't about my kid. It's about the 20,000 students in that school district, and I have to advocate for all 20,000 of them. And as a parent, I'll always advocate for my kid, right? I just stepped off. But as a school board director, 20,000 are my children. Well, as a state senator, I don't legislate for my kid, nor do I legislate for my little community. I legislate for the state of Washington, so the greatest number of people feel like they're part of this. That's our jobs, right? And you can take yourself out of that, but it's not okay for you to legislate for your child. And that's what this is often about. An individual legislating what they think is right for their individual child or family, and that's perfectly fine. But that's not the law. That's your family law. That is not state law. And so that part to me is this constant conversation about what we need to do and why we need to do it. And it's not about disagreeing with you. I will never take away your right to believe what you believe and to think what you think and to teach your kids what you want to teach them. But you may not take that away from me. You may not take that away from me. That's my right as well. And when we have young people that don't have significant adults in their lives, that's also my job, to make sure they have a place to come to get what they need as well, because it's my job to take care of all of those kids. No child should feel unsafe in a public school setting. No child. And we have many that do already. We have issues around intersectionality. We have we have so many things. We don't need to add, one more. This is more than just about sexual health, It's about the power to stimulate, large-scale social change. Thinking about the role that men and women play and how they interact with each other. It has an ability to create a cultural shift and really address many, many social issues, again, besides just sex and sexuality. And it protects children in their early years, and it invests in the well-being of generations to come. I have contact with my teen parents, and their moms and dads in my class in the 70s and 80s are in their 50s now. And the kids that were born in my class are in their 30s. And I have the value of being able to say, what did I do right and what did I do wrong and what do we all need to do differently? And we need to talk about it, and we need to not be afraid to talk about it. And we need to know that when we do this, we can dramatically shift the lives and change momentum of so many people, so many people forever. And that's really where I'm going to stop. And I'm going to wonder what you want to know. And then I have some errant thoughts that are not connected, but that kind of hook things in as you ask questions that may or may not come up that I want to make sure, we talk about before I end. And I have no idea how I'm on time. You're good. Am I good? Yep. Okay. Anybody want to know something? Get out of here. I'm going to give you a 3001, 3002. There's somebody back there first. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was curious how implementation of the comprehensive sex education has gone in school districts, because I know sometimes, at least I've seen in Oregon, even after it's passed, school districts have a really hard time making sure that teachers are teaching the components of it.
So, it's interesting because I know we had talked a little bit and I got some information around your, we call it TPEP, but your teacher training model and such. And, curricula-wise, that usually happens at a district level. And when you're looking at teacher evaluation and you're looking at your curricula, that really has to be, there's not a legislative nexus there. But as a legislator, it's important for me to follow up. So I always ask for implementation input and ask which districts have actually started to implement it. The way we had done it, the districts that had been doing sex ed, we asked them to include the affirmative consent, which were the additional pieces that we added. And then the next year, we told the new districts that we started with new districts with grades that they started with. So now we're in this year, all of our districts will be in implementation. And so we have one person, Lori Dills, who's our Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, and is really tasked with supporting and making sure that folks are doing it. I think one of the things, it depends on who's teaching it, and if you've got standards, because if you've got your sexual health standards and they're in a course or a class, then you should be able to see in scope and sequence that your teacher is teaching them. You should also be able to have conversations with young people. You should also have a place for people to come and talk if it's not being taught. And that's, I think, the value of having course curricula, and also that parents know, because if you actually see what's being taught and then it doesn't ever come up, it's just as concerning as if it's on there and you don't want it to be taught, and it is. So I don't know what the Oregon process is, but I think that is the critical piece. It's like, it's one thing to say, go do it, and then the second thing is the implementation of that. And I would imagine Department of Ed is going to play a role in that. And I don't know if it's like our Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, they don't have direct, their job is to proceduralize, if you will, or operationalize legislation. And they don't really have supervisory responsibility over schools and school boards either, except for, if there's a law like this. What you don't want to do, though, is take money away from a school district because they may not be doing something, because that ultimately takes away from the scholars in the end. And so that's the other piece that's really kind of critical. What my 5237, the bill that I'm going to drop, does, it says is if it's not happening, then there is a team that goes out and works with that school district and school board and superintendent, as well as community, and the community comes together, and they together will create the curricula and make sure, and the curricula is all vetted through OSPI, so it's all available on OSPI's website. If they want to use another curricula themselves, then they have to submit that and make sure that the critical pieces are part of that, and then that gets approved. But the process is not going to be, the process will be checking on to make sure it's in the curricula, and then also having a process of accountability and monitoring, which is what what OSPI will be doing if it's not. And then that process will kick in place, and we'll see what happens. And again, the bill is the initial bill, so the way it ends, we'll see how it ends. But that's another thing. I mean, you can pass all the words on paper you want, but it's gotta roll out into something that young people are gonna get. Teacher eval is one of those ways, but again, outside of my purview as a legislator. Yeah. Oh.
Was there a fiscal impact associated with the bill, and was there money given for school boards to implement?
No, there was not money given to school boards, because it's part of what they should have been doing and should be doing anyway. The curricula, again, we did open ed resource curricula, and that stuff is all available through OSPI, and they have curricula adoption money anyway. All these things, it didn't really do anything. I think the only other thing would be, is if they're not doing anything, would be the professional development and professional learning that teachers are asking for. I think that's critical as well. You can't give somebody a curricula to do and say, go figure it out yourself, especially in this kind of a way. So there was not a fiscal note on 5395, but there very well could be in many places if the structure wasn't already in place or you didn't already have some of the materials. Yeah.
I see the importance of teaching sexuality education to students. When you speak to parents and you also speak to teachers and having these conversations, you're already asking teachers to do so much. Mm-hmm. How can we continuously support teachers in teaching sex ed, and very equitable, but also really culturally relevant to students of colors too?
And I think, that's kind of this conversation is where and who teaches it, right? And is it, if you've got health classes it should be part of what you're doing in health anyway, but if you don't have health teachers, then to me that's where you use your community organizations and you use folks that may not be your teachers, but folks out in your communities, whether it's Planned Parenthood, whether it's clinics, whether it's nonprofits, folks that work with young people. And I don't know your resource bank around this place, but I know you got some. And I know there's folks that work with young people outside of the school system that tend to also be more culturally relevant, more culturally responsive, and often done in native language. Critically important as well. So I don't think that the only place for schools, the only people that believe that should be in schools are teachers. I believe schools should be community hubs. And so you bring your resource of your community in, and I guess that's what I would say. And you're right. You know, teachers are overwhelmed, and why we don't want to continue adding credits, we also need to get rid of some things. We don't tend to do that. We tend to say, here's more, but nobody's ever said, what should we stop teaching we don't need to do anymore? Or teachers are afraid we'll change, so they keep doing what they're doing, and then they add what we're asking them to just in case we change our mind, because they don't want to have to go back and pick it up again, so they just keep on. And so, you know, I mean, it's one of those process things, but it is a huge issue. And we've got to think, gym, PE, where else do people talk about this kind of stuff, right? And then how do we include that in what kids want to know and where they want to know? How are you using advisories? Do you have advisories? We have advisories. We have these conversations all the time. What are we doing in those classes and in that time? And do we need to be the ones, or do young people? Can they teach each other? They teach me all the time. Yeah.
Sex ed, another big important topic is injection drug use and drug use in general also contributes.
Say again?
Sex ed contributes to, and the topic of injection drug use and drug use, and it's a big thing in teens and not quite knowing. I'm curious, in the curriculums, how do you foresee, or what are you doing right now to encourage talking around injection drug use and the increase for STD?
Say that? Injection? Okay, I'm like old ears because I'm not hearing what you're saying.
I'm also like speed rambling. So in sex ed, there's also injection drug use that we talk about. You know,
drug use.
Drug use. How are we combining those things to also educate on that?
Well, you know, it all fits together. I mean, the risk of drug use and the outcomes in STDs. Yeah, I mean, it's all about risky behavior, and it's about knowing, you know, adolescents, your job is to experiment. Try things on, right? I mean, it's your job. That's all of our jobs. And we did it. All of us did it. All of us experimented. You know, the difference was a long time ago, we didn't let people on this fluid continuum of sexuality. You went back to either this or that. I said last night, and you're either comfortable where you went back to, or you weren't, and you just pretended, or you were kind of seen as this outcast because you became your true selves. We're now on this place where people are floating and flowing, but drugs and alcohol play a huge role. You know, I talked about that with affirmative consent, with the young men that came to me and said, you know, they don't know, they're afraid now because if actually they can get in trouble for doing something when someone says no and they say yes, before they could just kind of joke it off. And it's like, no, this is serious stuff. When someone says no, they mean no. And that means you back off. It doesn't matter if you think they're joking or not. And the drugs and alcohol just exacerbate all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I talk about it just like I talk about anything else. And I think especially now, too, you just add fentanyl, you're not even going to be alive to experiment. Because, you know, I mean, we're talking, you know, serious stuff. But I think drugs and alcohol play a huge, that has to be all part of this conversation because it's what we do as adolescents and as young people. And to not talk about it is a disservice because it's not real, you know. I don't know if that answers, but yes, talk about it all. I think information's power, and, you know, we just think that if kids know that that's not good for them, it is okay for them to know and to know more so that they can make those decisions. Hey.
Hi. So I had a question. It said that, I just came back in from the meeting. I'm sorry, I had another thing to attend to. But it says that teachers are overwhelmed and that we should make sure that they know that there are other resources out there. And so what I'm curious is, we see a lot of times that there's a lot of problems that we're facing with trying to reach the schools directly to say, well, we're just overwhelmed, we're overwhelmed. Whereas in our program at Liberty House, where we like to provide those outside resources where you were talking about, how is it that we can probably reach those schools? Because sometimes it's quite difficult because there's so much that principals have to go through, that superintendents have to go through, and we try to go to teachers, but teachers are, they're the most unappreciated, and so they're already tired. So how is it that, do you think that we can get into schools a little bit more effectively? Is there a way around that?
Yeah, and I think it is about a district level, not at a and unfortunately it is at a superintendent level. I think if you want an aligned kind of a program and you want to make sure that all kids get what they need, then you do it through a district. If you only care about your community or your neighborhood, then you might enter in your elementary school or your high school and you might have a relationship. In my district, not anymore. That's what we used to do, and then we had beacons of goodness. And then we had schools that had diddly squat because they were in neighborhoods and in communities that did not have resource. So now in my district, everything comes through the district office, and people might see that as gatekeeping, but it's around an equity lens. And the equity lens that says we're going to make sure that when this resource comes in, that we're going to look at where greatest need is, and that's where we're going to place the resource, because if we place it where there's greatest need, it will rise and lift all. And when we don't do that, those that get it always get it, and those that don't never do. And so, and it also is a way to, I think, strategically to think and leverage resource at a district level versus school by school or classroom by classroom. And it just depends. And I know smaller districts, when you've got the principal is the superintendent, is also the maintenance guy and drives the bus, that's even more difficult. And I think that's where your community partnerships play even a greater role. And again, I think it's offering something, but offering it at a level, and it's like, how can we meet your need and how do we meet your students' need? But I think at least the conversation with the superintendent, or they'll send you to their chief academic officer or whatever, but systemically I think it's how you approach it as opposed to school by school by school by school. If we were in Canada, you'd go to the ministry and education, minister of education, and then everything goes and everything's the same. That's just not how it works in our world, but when we're talking about something like this, I think it's critical that all people and all young people have access. Thank you. Okay. More than you wanted to know. Oh, good. Okay, excellent.
Wait, stay here. Stay here.
Okay.
Thank you very, very, very much, team, Sherpy team. Also, just to say, I think probably most of you have another comment or question, and we will have time for that. So please stick around. After lunch, we will have an open discussion, and Senator Wilson and Senator Patterson will still be here, so we can continue this. But before we get to lunch, we have something special that we would like to award Senator Wilson. This is for you.
Oh my God.
And you can open it. It's very heavy. And what it says is, and we'll have it on display so you can see, what it says is, with enormous gratitude, we honor Washington State Senator Claire E. Wilson for her outstanding vision and leadership in advancing comprehensive sex health education in the state of Washington and beyond. Presented by the Willamette University Sexual Health Education Research Project and Oregon Education and Public Health Professionals.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, it's heavy.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Okay, with that, Mala will describe to everyone how we're going to do lunch.
Okay. The most important part of the day. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for your attention and attendance at today's symposium. I think for lunch, we're gonna split the room. We're gonna do this side, come up first, and then we'll do the other side. But before we get into that, we're all about to hear from 3 young individuals who are currently working at the intersection of public health and sexual health education. And these are some of the most prominent champions that are kind of pioneering the way for change at this intersection that we're talking about today. So first, we have Marissa Level, who originally hails from Pennsylvania. She received her BA from Marquette University and her Master of Public Health from Oregon State University. Prior to her current work in Lane County, Oregon, Marissa worked in Milwaukee, Wisconsin as a family case manager and violence victim advocate. Since 2021, she has served as the School and Community Health Promotion Coordinator with Lane County and Public Health Prevention Team. In this role, she facilitates school-based programs to improve health and well-being for students and families. She does this by partnering directly with educators, administrators, and community members to implement culturally responsive and equitable solutions to the county's most pressing health problems. And then second, no second.
You saw on the schedule, we're multitasking here, putting a lot of pressure on our panelists to eat fast. But Marissa will speak first, and while the rest of us are getting up to get lunch, and then we will listen to them while we're having lunch. Okay, so for this half of the room, go ahead and get up, and we have buffet lunch over here, and the signs are describing what are in the particular items. Okay?
I'll take my stuff out of your way.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Can people hear me all right? Am I too loud? No? Good? Okay. So thank you so much, Joyce, for the introduction. My name is Marissa. I use she, her pronouns, and I work with Lane County Public Health as the School Health Promotion Coordinator. So I oversee a portfolio of school-based health promotion programs and work with 16 school districts across our county on implementing those programs. I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looks like in Lane County, what our priority areas are currently with the school-based work, share an example around sexual health education and STI prevention, and then talk about some of our key findings and recommendations that came out of some needs assessment work that we did. So in Lane County, we are a massive county. I have 16 school districts that I work with. I put a little map there just to show you. We go all the way out to the coast, to Florence, and then up into the Oak Ridge and Blue River areas, and then down to Cottage Grove in South Lane. So I won't touch on this too much because I'm sure you all already know it, but school-based health programs are super important. They help us reach kids and families. Kids spend 8 hours of their day in schools, if not more than that. So the policies and practices that we implement in the school setting have a huge impact on kids. So in Lane County, through local data and conversations with key partners in the community, we have been working in these 5 priority areas since I've been in my position. So the first one, and probably my biggest portion of work, is around mental health and suicide prevention. The second one historically was our largest program pre-pandemic, but it has since taken a back seat because we've seen such a need in mental health and substance use prevention instead. But we did do a lot of work around like physical activity and nutrition programming in the past. The third one is tobacco and substance use prevention. We're seeing that vaping prevention is a huge need for our schools right now too. So I've been doing some work around that in the past year with some of our districts. The fourth one, which I will dive deeper into in a minute, is STI prevention and sexual health education. This is our newest priority area that came in about 2022 because, as we saw in the slides earlier, STI rates in the state of Oregon have skyrocketed, and we saw that especially in our county among young people. So sexual health education with youth became a massive priority for the work that I do. And then this last piece is youth engagement and youth voice, and that kind of encompasses all of those other priority areas. So I hold a youth council with high school students from across the county. We meet a couple times a month, and I hear from them about what's going on in schools, about what they want to see change, and the supports that they need within the school setting to address some of these health priority areas that we're identifying. So within Lane County, we've seen a big increase in sexually transmitted infections, specifically a 64.3% increase over the past decade, which is really alarming. The burden is especially high among young people. So people under the age of 25 made up approximately 30% of Lane County's total population, but 60% of all STI cases that we are seeing. So very disproportionate disease burden among young people. We also did a survey in 2022 of community members across Lane County and found that 25% of people within the county felt that we needed to do a better job at providing sexual health education and STI prevention efforts. Most respondents, the majority of people who filled out the survey, believed that schools and healthcare providers are key players in providing this sort of education for youth in addition to parents. So we saw that people are really invested in having education be a partner in providing information about sexual health. A majority of Lane County residents also support education to prevent unintended pregnancy and STIs, as well as promote healthy relationships and consent. So broadly in our communities, we're seeing support for these ideas. People might differ in how they want to get there, but generally it's something that a lot of our community members care a lot about. I'm going to skip this slide for the sake of time because I think we're all here. We know that sexual health education is important and that when it's comprehensive and inclusive and medically accurate and age appropriate, we see all sorts of positive outcomes for kids, well into adulthood too. So now I'll talk a little bit more about the sexual health education needs assessment that I worked on over the past few years. It's hard to believe that this all started 2 years ago. It feels like it has gone by in the blink of an eye. But back in March of 2022, I started interviewing teachers, administrators, school nurses, other stakeholders in the school environments about sexual health education and the gaps that they were seeing in that. And so I spent a couple months doing those interviews. Sometimes I just had to show up at the schools and knock on their doors because they weren't answering my emails. And so I would just drive out and be like, hey, I'm here. You might as well talk to me. And so I did that for a few months, gathered a lot of data. We had 13 out of our 16 school districts participate in some way, which was an incredible engagement from our district partners. And so once we did that, we compiled the results, coded it for qualitative analysis themes, and then reported back to our schools and to our funders about what we found. We also established a partnership with the Oregon Department of Education, specifically Sasha, around helping to create a list of comprehensive sexual health education resources for our teachers because that was something they were really asking for. And then to the current day, I've continued to provide some technical assistance, curriculum consultation, and then offering professional development opportunities with our teachers around this subject area. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. I already mentioned that we had good engagement from our school districts on participating in this work, so I'll skip there. From the quantitative survey that we did, we found that half of administrators and teachers named a lack of professional development opportunities as a big barrier to sexual health education. Almost half also named a lack of content area expertise as a barrier. More than a third named a lack of classroom time. So again, integrating sexual health education into other areas can be a huge benefit for teachers who are already really strapped for time. Less than a third of teachers reported that they were very familiar and comfortable with the state health education standards. So that was a big thing for us to take notice of. And I'll talk a little bit more about professional development opportunities, but we hosted an event last year where we talked a lot about the state health education standards and invited teachers to come participate in that. And we're doing something similar next week. So this idea around professional development and training opportunities was the number one thing that we heard in our interviews with teachers. People are often handed a textbook or given a link to something online without any sort of support or training or time to even get familiar with the information. And so they named that as something they really wanted to see change. And so we at Public Health started offering professional development events for our teachers and other school folks who want to come. So we had a sexual health education summit last May, which was attended by about 35 of our teachers across the county. The one that we're holding next week, we have double the number of people signed up. So we've got 70 teachers planning to come to that. So that's super exciting. And just covering a wide variety of topics. I put out a survey to see which topics they wanted to be covered the most. And so that has been a really great strategy to use, just to hear directly from educators what they want to see, what they want to learn about. We also found that community norms and parents can often influence the way that sexual health education is taught, especially around different religious and cultural values. Gender identity does seem to be a big touchy subject for a lot of people. And so I've worked with some amazing advocates and school partners and helped prep them for school board meetings and give them evidence-based resources so that they're not going into those school board meetings or these curriculum adoption meetings unprepared. And then another big thing that we see in our county, because it is so large, is that we have a huge discrepancy in where sexual health services are located, like in terms of medical practices and things like that, clinics. And so there's definitely a need across our county for more school-based health centers, more clinics, more mobile public health to help address some of the gaps in services that we see. These were some of the recommendations that have come out of our work over the past few years. I'm going to wrap this up super quick. So the first one, offer more paid professional development opportunities around sexual health education for teachers. One thing that we're doing and that we did last year as well for our professional development events is offer substitute teacher stipends. So we get that covered for the school district so that that's not coming out of their own funds. We also have a list of evidence-based curriculum that we can go through with teachers or district personnel that are adopting a curriculum for the entire district. So we can talk through what those different options look like, as well as provide funding to cover any costs associated with that. And then the last one is holding community forums for parents and other community members that have an interest in learning more about what their kids are doing in school and that might have some concerns or questions. We were talking before the symposium started at our table just around the fact that partnerships with public health entities can really take the heat off schools. And so, like, if I can go in and talk to a district, I can kind of take some of those harder questions so that my principals, my teachers are not under fire for any of what they're doing. So that is a good opportunity for us to step in as like a health authority and really provide some of the evidence around these topics. I'm going to stop there and allow my amazing fellow panel presenters to talk now. But my contact information is here. Please feel free to reach out with questions. Okay.
Stay here for just a second.
Okay.
Anyway. Thank you so much, Marissa. Just to say This model, and the reason we've invited Marissa here to speak with you, is an amazing model. And you can just imagine if Marissa was not in the public health department, not working with the schools in Lane County, you would have pretty much the rest of the state. Because this is not a model that is universal at all here, and I don't know about the rest of the country. But to have someone specifically designated, like a Marissa, in a public health department to work with the schools is maybe something we can all maybe try to achieve here in Oregon. A few questions and comments for Marissa, and then we'll have our next participant.
Okay, go here first. I can just talk loud. Okay.
Oh, okay. I won't just talk loud.
Hi. Okay. So this is wonderful, this assessment, and I actually am immediately going to send an email to the Marion County epidemiologist that I'm connected to see if we've got something similar. But I work on the Marion Polk CHA and CHIP, and so I'm wondering how, because I believe Lane County is in a CHA year.
Yes, we are.
Sorry, I'm speaking in acronyms. The Community Health Assessment and the Community Health Improvement Plan. So Marion and Polk are also in a Community Health Assessment year. And if anybody wants to know more, I don't have cards actually, but you can talk to me. But I am just curious because there's so much great information, and I'm wondering if you are folding this into the health assessment and in the development of the improvement plan, and if you've got your CCO looped in on a lot of this stuff.
Yes, so the CCOs pay for me. That's where my salary comes from. So about in 2016, my position was formally written into a prevention plan through Lane County Public Health in partnership with investments from our two CCOs. We're a unique county. We have both Pacific Source and Trillium, so that makes things extra complicated. But that's where our funding comes from. So they invest $1 or so per member per month into a primary prevention fund. And this fund supports my position, a couple other positions in public health, and then all of our health promotion programming. And so all of our school-based programs are funded through that. So it is tied to the CHA and the CHIP, but not exclusively through it. So it's its own thing, but it's also included in it, if that makes sense. We can talk more because it's really complicated. But simply that's, yeah. Okay. Is it Kayla? Yeah, Kayla's great. Yeah.
Oh, the step stool's gone. Okay. Okay. Hi, everybody. So I'll be introducing our next panelist, Alex Martin, who completed his BA at Linfield College and his master's degree from West Virginia University. He earned his administrative license from George Fox University, and Alex is currently in his 13th year of teaching and 5th year at Woodburn High School. His teaching experience has covered an array of places from K through 12 health and physical education in McMinnville, Yamhill and Carlton, and Woodburn school districts. Alex is also an educational leader, currently serving in his 3rd year as department chair for health education in Woodburn. As a leader, he has held multiple positions from the district wellness committee to the district curriculum committee, including, and most recently, as vice president for the Health Education with Oregon's Society of Health and Physical Educators, also known as SHAPE. As a staunch advocate for health education, Alex presented his views on the value of skills-based health education in the 2022 Oregon SHAPE Conference. So without further ado, Alex Martin.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak. This group is a little older than the groups I'm used to speaking to, so. Speak right into the mic. Is that good? There we go. Okay. There's my my contact info if you have any questions at the end of this. But go from there. I'm actually going to make sure I don't go too far. There we go. So in 10 quick minutes, we will cover the importance of health education, demands on the calendar. Does anyone really care? And sex ed, how are we doing, and possible fixes. Why do I have to know this? The eternal question of every high school student. In health education, it's easy because you're going to use this every day for the rest of your life, whether we're talking about nutrition or sex ed or whatever the concept or content might be, you're going to use this. And so it's one of the reasons I love teaching health. I think it is the most important subject. Hopefully every teacher teaching thinks their subject is the most important. But I think this is the most important and certainly the most impactful. Oh. There we go. No, play. Does it play? No? Okay. So last week during spring break, we had a student who was driving home at 2 a.m., junior with his freshman brother. Alcohol was involved, and the driver, the junior, lost his life, and his little brother had to be life flighted, is still in critical care. And so the things that we talk about and teach are of vital importance. It hits deep when stories like this come out, especially in any community, but when you know the kids. This was a student that I'd had last year. And in the last few years in Woodburn, and I'm sure it's the case across many districts, we've had students we've dealt with suicide, we've dealt with sexual abuse, we've dealt with a number of things, drugs and alcohol, gang violence, all of those types of things. And for me as a health teacher, when I see a story like this, when we got the email from our administrators, it was, what could I have done? We talked about drugs and alcohol. We talked about the dangers of drinking and driving. And so you feel a little sense of failure almost. It's tough. And this is the giant puzzle that we have to put together. The graduation requirements are 1 credit, so that's 2 semesters of health. There's 80 days in a semester. Then you factor in state testing, you factor in snow days, you factor in PEP assemblies and things like that, and it dwindles down even more than that. And so in total, they get 160 days of health education through their entire educational journey in high school. It's roughly 10 days per unit of health. And these are the topics that we have to go through and cover. They're all vital, but to cover them in 10 days, you're only getting to surface level material on most of it. You then have the laws. You see alcohol, drugs, and sexual health are in pink there. That's for ODE. For sexual health, at least 4 days per year of instruction is required, which when they only have health twice, makes it difficult to do that annually. Same with drug and alcohol prevention. We're required to teach drug and alcohol prevention annually, but they only have health twice in their in their high school careers. We also have to teach first aid and CPR, hands-only CPR as well. And so there's a lot of things on top of all the other things, each of which is vitally important that they learn about. Of course, all of this while creating a space where they feel safe to have the conversations with their peers and with you as a teacher. So, speaking of important, this right here is, in my experience, what drives what the districts see as important. It's the report card that every school district gets at the end of every year that shows your attendance, it shows your test scores, it shows on track to graduate. None of this has anything to do with health education. And because of that, it is something that falls way down on the list of priorities. It's not state tested. It's not on the ODE report card. It doesn't factor into whether they're on track to graduate, and it's not tied to any funding. So from an administrative point of view, it isn't important. This is not a Woodburn issue. This is more than that. I love our administrators and our superintendent. But the realities are that it leads to less important when it comes to staffing. It's seen as an elective and becomes a dumping spot for counselors. Dumping ground. So in our school, Health 1, we teach, it's meant to be a freshman, sophomore class. And then Health 2, their second semester of getting health is meant to be a class for juniors and seniors after they can all drive and the new realities that they're dealing with as drivers and the health topics that go into that. However, because of the lack of electives that are semester long, it becomes a dumping ground for a lot of students. And so currently 65% of Health 2 students are sophomores. And after this year, they'll never have health education again as juniors and seniors. They'll have met those requirements and be done with health. Ideally, you'd love to have 2 to 3 full-time health teachers. But the reality of what we have is 1 full-time health teacher, and we have a football coach, a PE teacher who are not licensed to teach health. So they each teach 1 class because they can get away with that. We have a choir teacher who teaches a class. We have a Russian lit teacher who teaches 2 classes of health. And we have a long-term sub because the credentials are less important for the sub. So long-term sub teaches 4 classes of health, and that sub has never taught health education before. So then it comes to advisory and social emotional learning time. This is about 1 to 5 times a week, depending on which district you're in. You're getting about 25 to 45 minutes when you're in there. Again, I'd love to see 2 to 3 full-time health teachers. I'd be over the moon if there were 2 credits required of health. But the reality is that you have content teachers who are not trained in teaching these things, but because of the laws, every year we have to get sexual health, but they're only in health education twice, so this stuff has to be covered in advisory. So all content teachers are assigned. They have no training. It's usually bought with expensive curriculum. There's no accountability to whether they're following it or not. It becomes essentially a study hall for the kids and a glorified extra prep time for teachers. Is it important to parents? The University of Michigan does a MOT report. I don't know what MOTT stands for. In education, we love acronyms, so they all mean different things. But MOT report comes out every couple of years where they identify parent concerns when it comes to health and health education. And so this is the most recent one that came out in 2023. And you can see on there the overuse of devices, social media, internet safety, depression, suicide, bullying. Now, the things that we have mandated that we have to teach through ODE on drugs and alcohol, smoking, vaping comes in at number 10, drugs and alcohol at 15. Then we get to sexual health, and according to the parents, number 20 is sexual activity, number 24 on their list of concerns is gender issues. Yes, this is national. They also then break it down. I couldn't find the breakdown for 2023, but in Woodburn, we're a district that's 87% Hispanic. And so where I start with my curriculum is this list of parent concerns. And if it's on here, then it's something that I want to make sure that we're teaching. And so this is the 2020 list that we used when we came up with our curriculum, our current curriculum in Woodburn. to make sure that we're covering these things that parents see as concerns. All right, so let's talk about sex ed. If you know this clip, I would love for it to have played, but if you know this clip, it's from the movie Mean Girls, and essentially what he says is, abstinence is the way, don't have sex. If you have sex, you'll die. Here's a box of condoms. And that is the entirety of the sex ed talk that he goes through. And unfortunately, for many of us, that's what sex ed was like. And for many of the parents of the students that I teach, that's what sex ed was as well. So we have 20 days because they have to have it every year, so they're definitely going to have it every year that they have health. We have a total of 20 days, and these are all the topics that we need to get through in that time. It's extensive. All of them are important and need more than a day to be covered, but a day is what most of them tend to get. We know it's important. These are the numbers from the 2021 youth survey, behavior survey nationally, because Oregon doesn't participate in the survey. 21% of high school students are currently sexually active. 30% have ever had sex. 52% used a condom last time they had sex. And 21% drank or used drugs before their last sexual experience. So in a classroom of 30 students, 7 are currently sexually active, 2 more have ever had sex but aren't currently sexually active, and 21 have never had sex before. So looking where that was compared to the 2015 survey, which was the last one done prior to that, you've got, let's see, 6% have had sex with 4 or more partners, which is down from 12% in the 2015 survey. 30% have had sex, down from 40% previously. 21% are currently sexually active, which is down from 30% previously. There are causes for concern in these numbers, though. Fewer students are using condoms. Some of that is more knowledge and information about other forms of birth control. But a lot of that too is, in talking with my students, the prevalence of Plan B and the use of that as contraception. Also, alcohol, drugs are just as prevalent as they were in 2015 when it comes to that. So more knowledge and teaching about risk factors needs to continue to happen. So growth mindset, how do we do better? For a lot of us, this is how we learned. We wanted to know what we were learning, then how do I need to do it, and finally why. The why was irrelevant. We were told what to do, this is how you do it, this is what you do, and go from there. And this came about from a conversation with my friend who is state championship soccer coach at state and high school, who was saying that he was just struggling to connect and reach his students and the students today. And that's because for them, this model has changed. The what has gone down to the bottom because for them, the what they can find in the palm of their hands, literally in their phones. They can get the information to whatever subject it is. So for them, it's why. Why should I look up from my phone to learn about this? So the why has become the most important thing. How am I going to learn it? Or how do I need to do it? And then finally, the what, that's the easy part for them. And so that lends itself to skills-based health. And skills-based health amongst SHAPE, Society for Health and Physical Educators, skills-based health is kind of the future, I guess, of health education. And so the units are based on skills and the focus is on skill development. The standards are all skills. And so when you get into it, instead of having a unit on nutrition and healthy relationships and alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, mental health diseases, your units are based on the standards of goal setting, of decision making, of self-management. And so once you're in those, you can begin to do decision making. You can cover sexual health in decision making, in communication, in analyzing influences, advocacy. This is an opportunity for me to show students that advocacy isn't just for them, but it's for me as well. To come and speak and be part of this is an opportunity to advocate. And so the units become about those things, and then you see all the different avenues. Nutrition can go into goal setting, nutrition, self-management, analyzing influences, why we eat what we eat. It's all based on the standards and the skills. As I said, I'd love to see 2 credits. I think that is should be minimum for health education. Somehow to show on a report card to bring about some accountability, and similar to how Maryland in 2021, the state of Maryland adopted a statewide curriculum of skills-based health. Seeing that in more states, I think, would be a great benefit to this. That's all I've got. Yeah. Any questions? Or?
Can you put your contact info back up?
Yes. Yes. There we go.
Hi, I'm Lisa Logan. I have sort of a pretty small question. When you talked about them getting 20 days of something, how long is the class period?
So it's going to be different at different schools. Some have
in your school.
For us, 46 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
So 10 days, 46 minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So in Woodburn, hello, my name is Cindy. I'm a school registered nurse. I just feel like I should tell everybody who I am. And thank you for being a health teacher, first of all. Do your students know where to access health care? And if you don't know the answer, that's fine. I just wonder if you talk about that.
Oh, healthcare meaning overall healthcare?
Especially for sexually transmitted diseases or possible pregnancies, or when you talked about Plan B. I mean, I just wonder if they ask you or they tell you.
We partner with a great program. It's been mentioned here, Teen Council through Planned Parenthood. They come and if you're not familiar with it, they train high school students to share about sexual education. And so it's, for me to stand in front of a group of high school students and talk about sex ed is one thing, but for their peers to stand in front of them and talk about it opens up a lot more conversation. They tend to listen a lot better to their peers than they do to me. And so it's been a great partnership, and through that also comes a lot of the resources that they have access to. And so yes, they are aware. We post a lot of that stuff for parents as well, and communication with parents as to what we're teaching so they can have a comfort level on the decision whether to opt out or not.
How do you reach a balance between wanting 2 credits and yet not having enough qualified, competent teachers to teach it the way that it needs to be taught well?
I don't know if it's a lack of, there are teachers out there who are qualified to teach that. But, I'll just use our district as an example. We use teachers who aren't trained in health education, because if they can teach a one-off class in it, I think the rule is as long as it's less than half of your teaching day, you can teach any subject. But if you're required to have 2 credits of it, now you need to have more trained health educators because you're going to have more health classes, and so that would, I think the teachers are out there, just the districts are finding creative ways to get more use out of their teaching dollars. I can have someone who is the choir teacher for 5 periods, and then for that 6th period, we'll have them teach health. So I think by making that a requirement to have it as 2, then you're going to have to staff it with at least 2 full-time. I think there will always be some of that, but with 2 credits, you're going to need more certified health teachers to be able to do that. So.
Okay, so for our final panelist, Rose Linville, who grew up in Idaho and began her research in sexual health during her time here as a student at Willamette. She took part in the very first sexual health education research project in 2019, and then went on to lead subsequent research projects that provided insight into sexual health education accessibility in Oregon. Rose currently serves as a public health specialist in the Sexual Health Division of Teton County, Wyoming Health Department. She built her position from the ground up after COVID stalled sexual health outreach efforts in the health department. Among her initiatives, she created a 3-day sexual health curriculum, including a highly interactive class-based board game, which is now used in almost every 9th grade classroom in Teton County. She has planned, implemented, and conducted mass-free STI testing events. She has also spearheaded gender inclusivity work on her local health department, as well as the broader community, facilitating trainings for the entire health department staff and creating a transgender access care guide, which lists local resources for those seeking gender-affirming care in Wyoming. Rose's work is Rose's work is heavily advocacy-based by the core principles of harm reduction and health equity. So, Rose, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, I will resist the urge to move around. I'm a mover, but I'll stay here. So hi, everyone. My name is Rose. I owe pretty much my entire sexual health career to Joyce Millen for getting me involved in all of this, and I'm really excited to be here today. Is this my clicky? Okay. Right one? Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about public health and sex education in Wyoming, with the knowledge that I am not expecting there to be any sort of change dramatically in Oregon, because we're really different. That's the first thing I learned about today. But just to chat a little bit about how we use our funding. So, why should public health invest in sexual health education? I have learned throughout my career in public health that we are very appropriately poised to provide support to students and teachers. And while in Wyoming, it's just me because I don't have a lot of population to cover, I have a couple suggestions for how Oregon could conceivably extend the access and extend their teaching ability. So, this is Wyoming, and what sexual health outreach looks like. We are under a program called the CDU, that's Communicable Disease Unit. Most of the deal with the Communicable Disease Unit is we're trying to prevent STIs, we're trying to prevent HIV transmission, and we're also trying to prevent tuberculosis transmission. I don't usually deal with tuberculosis, but it's part of the grant. We have 40 clinics in Wyoming utilizing our communicable disease funding. So all of our public health offices, which some counties do not have a public health office, so the ones that do utilize this funding. We have 10 of our 11 Title IX clinics also use our funding. We have 8 federally qualified health centers. We also partner with the University of Wyoming Student Health, and then one substance use treatment center. Anyone in Wyoming can access our funding by contacting the state, but these are the places that access funding consistently. So, my position, which is unique, in that it doesn't seem like it's exactly like this in any other state, there are 7 outreach positions that are funded by this very long CDC grant, which I will let you read, and HRSA Ryan White funding. So my salary and the salary of 7 other people in Wyoming are funded by this funding. Most of them are in public health departments, but the one in Laramie County is a LGBTQ organization. So, our grant use, we fund 2 public health nurses, 1 outreach position, which is me, and then 1 interpretation position, so we have full-time Spanish language interpreter in our grant. We kind of split it up in 3 different ways, and all of the people involved in this grant utilize and do these things to differing degrees. For education, we do direct education to grade school students and groups in substance use facilities. There is provider education, so we're talking to our local healthcare providers. We're doing social media outreach and tabling, handing out tchotchkes, handing out condoms, those kind of things. We also do general health outreach. Those are those mass STI testing events. We do safe sex material distribution. We have free condom dispensers around the county, and we also do data collection and distribution for our county. And then we also offer direct client care. So we have state-funded STI testing appointments, so anybody can come in and get all of their STI testing done for free. We have a $10 nurse fee, but other than that, if you live in Wyoming, you can access our services. And we also do HIV case management. So we do a lot of things. I am able to participate in any of these things. I can also do state-funded STI testing appointments, despite the fact not being a nurse. Part of that is that Wyoming is a little lawless, but it benefits my education. So I want to talk specifically about public health and sex ed and how I have found that it's actually a really helpful thing to have happen. So these are kind of the 3 reasons why I think that public health should partner with schools to teach sex ed. So first, that public health is centralized governmental influence, that they can increase capacity by outsourcing, and that they can also help support health equity in our schools. So first, for our centralized governmental influence, I have found with public health, we talked about it being a team sport. Most public health offices are really familiar with what's happening in their county, and they're able to refer students, teachers, anyone to other organizations. We also lend authority to outreach efforts. It's a lot easier to say the government, public health is coming into schools than it is to have a nonprofit. People get suspicious that nonprofits have their other agendas. We're tax funded, so we have to represent the taxpayer. We also have additional funding that we can access. Government isn't insanely well funded, but there are ways and there are grants that we're familiar with that can fund these outreach efforts. And for us specifically, I was actually going to ask, I didn't have a chance to, but I don't know if public health in Oregon actually is able to offer direct care. We can. So when I go in and teach, I bring in the nurses, much to their dismay. I feel bad for making them talk as much as I do. But they are actually coming in, the nurses that can offer STI testing, the nurses that can offer reproductive health care, and the nurses that can offer reproductive wellness visits. So it's really nice because students are able to meet nurses who are really nice and really cool and really chill, and then access our services because we are legally able to offer our services to people under 18. Public health also increases our capacity by outsourcing. We are trained educators giving direct instruction. I heard in a lot of these presentations that teachers do not feel ready to teach sex ed. I get it. It is awkward. Imagining being an algebra teacher and then having to do a condom demonstration in front of children that I'm going to see for the entire year can be a difficult thing to think about. And that totally ignores also the fact that there is a lot of trauma-informed education that we have to be a part of when we're teaching this stuff. It's bringing things up for students. I go to webinars every single day learning about the new ways that herpes is spread or these really difficult things. I do anonymous questions because a lot of times I have to look at the question, bring it back to the office, look up the answer, and then tell students because they have really good questions and they're really difficult. So expecting a teacher who's not medically trained is really difficult. And it's taking pressure off teachers as well to actually have to learn this material, to have to prepare this material, and it gives them additional time. One thing that I really like about our classroom model is that I'm able to come in with the nurse. We're doing like the general condom demonstration. We talk about dental dams, all that kind of thing. And then the teacher's back in the corner, so if a student has an issue, if something's brought up, there's someone the student can go to, there's someone that the student can trust and act as that additional support as another way to support our students in their learning. And it allows teachers to act as that known support, which is what I talked about. We want to make sure that teachers are someone they know. I notice when I go into classrooms, students do kind of get a little uncomfortable. They don't know if I'm going to be chill. They don't know what's going on. So having both sides and having someone that students know is really important. And it also supports health equity. So regardless of school funding, educators can teach students. So whether a school has the capacity to fund health teachers, whether the schools have capacity to, take a teacher out of teaching another classroom, we're teaching the same curriculum to everybody every single time. And we're always offering the same amount of times. It's up to the schools how much they utilize us, but we are there for them. Our outreach workers can also visit other community organizations and groups. We talked about I talked about going into a substance abuse or a substance use program. That is something that we're able to do. I have gone into, we have kind of a similar thing like teen council for our local domestic violence shelter. I go and I talk to those kids. So we're able to have a little bit more flexibility with who we're able to offer the curriculum to. And then our curriculum is consistent and medically accurate across the board. We're public health, so we're going to all the CDC webinars, we're making sure that we're double checking, we're always trying to keep the most accurate stuff because it's part of our job, so it's not teachers having to double check that their curriculum is medically accurate, it's us who already get the CDC webinars and all of that. I have some ideas for expanding reach. I looked it up and I believe that Marion County, which is where we are now, has about 16 times the population of Teton County. So I suspect that a position like mine, who's offering direct, I do all of the sex education teaching, would not necessarily work. But I really encourage thoughts on connecting higher education students to high school students. I have found in my curriculum that I still have the cool factor a little bit, just like I'm young enough that the students are like, okay, you probably know what you're talking about, you probably kind of understand what it's like to be young, but I will lose that eventually, I am sure. So keeping youth coming in and talking to students, maybe kind of like a big brother or a big sister style, really, really helps. College students, I imagine there are a lot of public health students at Willamette who would be willing to go into schools, and they would have the time to go through trauma-informed curriculum. They would have the time to know what's going on. They would have the time to educate themselves. I know Willamette students are busy, but it allows them to make it more of a priority, whereas a teacher may have a ton of other responsibilities on their plate. Another cool thing that we've done, it doesn't work for me because we don't have a college anywhere near where I am, but UW, which to you guys is University of Washington, to us it's the University of Wyoming, when they do mass testing events for their students, they recruit nursing students to do the testing. So that is super helpful for them because nursing students get direct experience and it expands their reach. I suspect that nursing students, it would also be super beneficial for any nursing students interested in public health, knowing that so much of their career will be education, to be a part of things like this. And I'm also really excited about youth-supported initiatives. Teen Council sounds so cool. It's not something that we have in Wyoming, but I think that it's super, super imperative to have students, peers, talk to them about these kind of things. I think the more we can give this information to students from a bunch of different areas, so public health, we're doing like the kind of boring, medically accurate stuff. Maybe our peer education students are talking a little bit more about consent, things like that, alcohol and drugs, while we're still supporting them. And beyond that, being able to support parents and being like, you can do the social emotional stuff. Like, I don't know your kid. I don't know who they're dating. I don't know what's going on with their life. You have a role in this, and I'm not trying to take it away from you, I think is all really beneficial. It may seem like we do a lot at our public health office, and we really do, but a lot of that comes down to the fact that Wyoming doesn't have a lot of these resources. So Wyoming doesn't have a Planned Parenthood. We don't have free STI clinics. We don't have a lot of the resources that Oregon has, so we kind of have to be a jack of all trades. But what it's allowed is, things that, because we have to do everything, we can offer everything to students. And I think that there is a lot of benefit in that, and I've found a lot of power in our position. Thank you. Yeah, no. Ever any questions? Oop. I don't know who has a microphone. I'm seeing questions.
Thank you for that. I'm really interested to hear more of your thoughts on like peer-led sex education. When I was in high school, I used to be a sex educator with Planned Parenthood and also an organization in my high school. And I found that like a lot of times we were just fighting the administration and some teachers who weren't very receptive. So I'm wondering how schools and also like public health officials like yourself can like support that type of programming in schools.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry to hear that you had to deal with so much. It's not anything that any of us in this room have not faced, I assume. But I think that what I have found with public health is there is a lot of authority in public health endorsing something. I think it's a difficult thing, and particularly in Wyoming, we kind of run up against a lot of like wanting to support something, but wanting to be a little bit more subtle, knowing that we might get a little bit of flack from it. But I think that having more organizations backing something like that, particularly because Planned Parenthood does have that negative connotation, public health doesn't really have that, even though, at least in my clinic, we offer exactly the same resources except for terminations. So ways that we can be team players, not only within public health, but within our community at large, I think is a really helpful way to go about it, and it's been helpful for us. Yeah.
And this is for you, but also what we haven't mentioned today is we have young people that are in institutional ed and in our institutional settings and that are in K-12 but may not be physically in our buildings. And just wondering if anybody has thought about how it is that we reach out to comprehensive sex ed when we're talking about, again, kids in institutional ed, child welfare, children who may not be in a home setting. And how it is, because again, those are our at-risk youth and often have many of the other trauma-informed issues I know that we need to work with. So just curious. Yeah.
No, you go and then I'll go.
I just have a quick thought on that. So we've partnered with our ESD, like our Educational Service District, to work with our juvenile detention facility. I have lots of feelings about juvenile justice, but that's an entity that we've partnered with locally, so maybe a strategy to explore.
Mm-hmm. I think the benefit of having such flexibility with like at least my position is that I can kind of go anywhere and talk to anyone. So as long as I have a foot in the door, as long as I have someone I can email, which is an issue, but there's techniques that we can do. I have the flexibility to take a nurse with me and go anywhere. So I'm meeting students where they're at instead of expecting them to come to us. And then once I've showed them, I mean, sometimes I get discouraged and I'm like, oh, they're never gonna remember all of this. But the entire point of what I'm doing essentially is if they know that they can access our services and that we are a safe place to access services, I have done my job. If that's the only thing that they know, then if they are worried about a pregnancy, if they are worried about an STI exposure, if they really want to get on birth control, we are there for them. So going to them and then letting them know that they can access our building and we can help them out. Yeah.
I'm worried this might be kind of a... Maybe. I think you turn it on. Hello? Yeah. I'm worried that this might be kind of a touchy question, but I'm curious about how the influence of county commissioners at all influences the work that you do, since that it is so broad.
Well, our county commissioners are cool, so they do definitely influence what we do, and a lot of our ability and outreach are based on what they can do. I have not been hugely limited by them, and I haven't really had to present a lot of my outreach efforts to them because since I'm under the umbrella of the health department, to a certain extent, I can fly under the radar because my entire position is essentially just focused on STI prevention. So anything I'm doing to prevent STIs, whether that's education, whether that's giving out condoms, whether that's mass testing events, I haven't really run up into it. I think usually other people in my position, I'm in a very lucky county in Wyoming. It's the only blue county in Wyoming. Other people aren't as lucky as me, and other people get a lot more limited in what they can do. So some people are really just focusing on STI prevention, even to the point of just trying to get people tested for HIV. Oregon had an increase about 69% in HIV in the last year, which is really concerning. About half of those were in stage 3. So that's people who didn't know they had HIV for a really long time and possibly could have been transmitting it. So their work is even lower than that, right? Their work is just like, we got to get people in the door to test. But they're still attempting to do education where they can, and they have the ability to do that if their communities allow it.
Stay here, stay here, stay here. Now, the last question was so important. Commissioners, school boards, they vary tremendously. So my personal opinion is it's up to all of us to help educate them and to show them. I think maybe we can make one commitment for all of us. I was taught by Senator Claire Wilson
not to refer to sex ed, but to refer to sexual health education. And I think that we all should adopt that and really have that sort of the universal, that this is not about sex alone at all. So many other things are involved, like our slideshow and like everybody else has shown us today. So right now we have the pleasure of inviting our 3 panelists up here once again.
and we have little awards for you as well. Here, I'll give it to the movie.
So we would like to honor and with appreciation Rose Linville, Marissa Level, and Alexander Martin. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate you and all the work you've done in just like moving sexual health education forward and your outstanding work with comprehensive health education. So thank you guys.
Okay. Thank you once again to all of our wonderful panelists, not to mention our wonderful senators, and some great questions and comments from the group so far. And we just wanted to offer another opportunity for people to have questions or comments or observations, suggestions. There's no limit on it. And also just to remind you that should you not wish to provide your recommendations or suggestions verbally, there's a piece of paper. You have a survey at the end, and we'll be glad to hear your suggestions and recommendations. I see already in the back.
It's working? Good. Hi, I'm Holly Dalton. I think I'm one of the only educators in the room. So a career educator, work at the Willamette Education Service District. We service 21 school districts. And so I'm listening and loving the ideas. One, Oregon's very different than Washington and Wyoming. And then thinking about how we could partner with outside agencies. The relationship is first and foremost with students. So if someone comes in the door and out the door, then that also could cause some great harm too. So what does that ongoing follow-up look like? Who does that student have in the school to lean on? Because some of these issues are very touchy and they don't have the support at home. So how can we think about partnering together as opposed to coming in and then leaving? So I'm thinking about those types of things. And then also the laws around who teaches and who's qualified to teach. And our schools are so vast, and we only service 21 school districts, and there are 219 or 210 in Oregon. So Salem-Keizer alone is huge. So 3 people on a staff can't come in and do 45 elementary schools. So what are our creative ideas around that? So just thinking about all those things swirling around.
Excellent. Senator, will you like to say something there, please? Yeah.
So I was at an ESD for 25 years before I came to the Senate, and so I think geography and I think leveraging resources is huge. And I know in my ESD, we were the largest in the state, and we had 37 school districts in the 2-county area. So we brought folks in together and created common language, we created common materials, and so even as a region, we're able to leverage dollars and leverage money and then share that with the 9 ESDs across the state. And I think leaving and coming, again, kids stay in a school, but they live in a community. And so for me, connecting kids to their community and families to their community is more critical than connecting them almost to somebody inside the school, because the school shuts at 3 o'clock or whatever, and you don't go back. So if somebody's going to do a one and done, that's not a relationship, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an ongoing relationship where I would know Rose comes into my classroom on Wednesdays, and Wednesdays while I'm in health. And then even if I'm not in health anymore, I still know Rose comes to my school. And when she comes in that door, I can find her because I know who Rose is. And when school shuts down and it's the Saturday or it's the Sunday or it's the summer, I know where Rose works. And so it isn't just in the school where I get my answer, but it's in the school where I get my resource. And then the other is, how are we using schools as our vibrant community spaces? And how do we bring co-location of services and resources into schools so that kids don't have to leave, but that they just become part of the landscape? And school-based health clinics are a great way to do that because we serve families in our school-based health clinics. What I would say is, I always say to our folks, make sure you have a door on the outside that folks can come to the clinic and a door on the inside. Because if a family has to come through a school building to get to a clinic, what they're able to offer is very different than if they park in a parking lot and come into the building from the outside. And so you can have two kinds of services, but again, it's supporting the idea of the community. But ESDs are the best way, to leverage and to not only resources, but people and people's expertise. So that's what I would say. Let's talk more.
Hi, I'm Sasha Grenier. I'm from the Oregon Department of Education. I'm the sexuality education specialist there. And I just wanted to make a plug for the new health education standards, the new health and sexuality education standards. They very much mirror so much of kind of the passion and ethos of this room right now. We have worked really hard over the last year and a half to get these passed. So in October of last year, the new health education standards passed, and they're kindergarten through 12th grade, what every student in Oregon has to learn for the next 7 years. And we've really tried our hardest to include, to meet our laws first and foremost, which in Oregon are very robust, right? Kindergarten through 12th grade or sexuality education has to be inclusive, medically accurate, include affirmative consent, be positive and not fear or shame-based. And so the new standards really include all of that and so much more. They've really shifted from our 2016 standards quite a bit to get much deeper in understanding things like consent and communication and friendship and inclusivity and gender and so much more. And so we're working really hard right now to launch those. So they're required to be implemented and rolled out by school districts by the 2025-26 school year. And this year, we've passed them, yay, and now we're working on instructional materials. So we're going to kind of pour over kind of national instructional materials and curricula and use our new criteria document, which is really comprehensive, and make sure that no kind of instructional materials that Oregon adopts can be kind of abstinence only or can be not inclusive. So we're working on measuring curricula to this new criteria this year. So by the 2025-26 school year, hopefully school districts will be more equipped with training, instructional materials, and a lot more to really improve and strengthen the sex ed that you all are describing and are kind of aspiring to have. And so please, I just wanted to say, like, we are working at the department to really help school districts and ESDs really implement, because I think so many of you talked about, like, we have these laws, but what about implementation? And hopefully that's where we can come in and really support. And, you know, we have a newsletter that goes out every month that has a lot of resources. We do trainings and a lot more to come. So just stay tuned and just thank you all for all your passion and expertise and everything you've brought, and just look at the standards because they're shiny and new and great. So that's all.
I think also, Sasha, you know, you could feel free to consider this group and this group expanded as sort of a forum for ongoing dialogue with ODE and OHA and things. And you know, not just a one-time lovely lunch and discussion, but a structure and people who could help you as you try to develop those complementary teaching curricula and tools. And integrating also teen teaching into the teachers. Yeah. Had a hand over here. Yes, please.
Hi. So my name is Max Goodfriend. I'm the Prevention Education Project Coordinator at Liberty House. This is Ruby Sella Plata. She is our bilingual prevention coordinator. Just a quick thing, if you don't know what Liberty House is, we're the local child advocacy center that serves Marion and Polk County. So we do have our clinical services where children who might have been abused come to our services, and they have full medical evaluations and forensic interviewing, and we work with DA, DHS, and law enforcement to help really create those reports to help make sure that we bring those people to justice. But the thing that we do is we're part of the prevention team. So we go out in the community and we help educate people about how to recognize the signs and prevent child abuse, child sexual abuse. But one of the reasons why I really wanted to come was we created a curriculum, a 6th grade curriculum that talks to students about self-worth, resiliency, but it talks about the other big elephants in the room like sexting and cyberbullying and those kinds of influences. And one of the things that I really learned, because we did a pilot back in 2021, and I'm getting somewhere with this, we did a pilot back in 2021 before I was ever involved, and we had, I believe, about 25 different educators in a few different districts around Marion and Polk participate, but they were the ones that were actually facilitating that curriculum. But when I was brought in and I was asked to look over this new curriculum and look over some of the suggestions and feedback, being a former educator, I thought, this is a lot to put on teachers to say, here's a new curriculum that you get to learn and go ahead. And so part of my thinking was, what if we were offering our services to come and actually facilitate these trainings and this curriculum ourselves? So I was wondering, with hearing from the educators in the room, especially, I can't remember your name, but the one who spoke about, Holly, thank you. I remember that. So, but I like the idea of hearing from educators and other people in the room, or even Rose, hearing about how it wasn't just Rose teaching this, that's other people that are teaching it. Are there advantages, or are there, what are the pros and cons of having the teachers facilitate these curriculums versus someone who's an outsider coming in? Because a lot of teachers have come to me and said, we think it will be more powerful if we had somebody else come in who they don't know, who they can kind of not look at as, oh, it's just my teacher, it's the next thing, but this is somebody brand new. But the teacher is there to support and always be there. And because I got to tell you, every single time I facilitated one of these trainings, after we talk about sexting, a kid always comes up and shares that it happened to them recently, that somebody asked or requested or forwarded, and it's heartbreaking, but it's true. So again, just to reiterate my question, what do the educators in this room, or people who have experiences of other people outside of your classrooms coming into your classrooms to teach curriculum, what are your pros and cons about that? Is that something that I should continue doing, or?
So one thing I wanted to share, so Oregon, Sasha was just talking about the adoption process. So districts are required to adopt a K through 12 curriculum that's comprehensive. So it wouldn't be just a 6th grade curriculum or a 7th grade curriculum. And so they have to go through a rigorous process, and then they have to pick something off that adoption list. And if they don't, then there has to be a justification of why. So I would strongly suggest not creating your own curriculum, but maybe some resources to enhance what the standards are telling us. And then we're making the shift, K-12, of teaching standards instead of teaching to the curriculum. So the curriculum is the tool that supports it. So I just want to reiterate that as a lens of the K-12 lens, that standards drive that piece. So, and then now wanted to talk about the other piece.
Thank you. Mel Nolan, Willamette SD. And I was in a middle school classroom, 6, 7, and 8 for 20 years. And I'm recently out. And I am out of the classroom. I am an ELA teacher that was told you get to teach health. So I'm in that category, but I became passionate about it. And just bringing in other folks, there are pros and cons, you're right. You should definitely keep doing that. The kids love it because they hear me all day, every day. And I'm there to support, like you said, as a person that they know. But sometimes, and I've had this experience as an adult, you feel more comfortable talking to a stranger about things or telling them something because I don't really know you. I'll probably never see you again, but I know that you know things and can help me if I need it. So that's a real plus that I have seen with students too, is they know that you are an expert, that you know things, that you've seen these things before. And they probably won't see you a whole lot, but they can get to you because they can talk to me if they need it. So it's a really nice, I've seen that be a great dynamic. I had women's health professionals from our community come in. I had Marion County health people come in, and everything they did was valuable. So I would say it's definitely more of a pro than a con. So keep doing that.
Hello. I totally agree, and I think that the way that our system has always worked is that we are always partnering with a pre-existing health teacher. Like, I am never just going into a school. Before I came, our health department kind of just did a big assembly and talked to them vaguely about condoms. I did not love that at all, because there was no ability for students to ask questions. There was no sort of interaction. And I have encountered other schools in Wyoming, because we're kind of strapped for teachers' resources, just like everybody else is, but we have a really hard time keeping teachers. One of the health teachers that I really like is she kind of stands as this health teacher who helps students and has them do presentations, reflections, and then brings in a bunch of local experts. So she brings in me and I talk about sex education. She brings in a local mental health counselor to talk about mental health and all of that. She brings in another expert in our community to do gender and sexuality. Not because she doesn't know it herself, but because then students are able to talk to an expert, and through doing that, then meet very nice people from all the organizations that they now can access, which is really fabulous, and I think it's worked really well. I really like it if I can go into a organization or a school more than once. As it stands, we kind of run into the same thing where 9th grade health is super easy to get into, everybody has to do that, but there's not really a standard health class for 11th and 12th graders. I wish there was, because I find if I go back into organizations a second time and there are some students who don't know me and some students who do, the students who know me are like, oh yeah, Rose is so cool. And then we have like great conversations and it's really, really fun, and it's another touch point for them to be like, oh yeah, you're coming back and we're learning these things again. So building relationships, but still being like the fun aunt who comes in and talks about sex and then leaves, which is very fun. And I do, yeah, the stranger thing, they're not worried about it. It's not embarrassing to talk to like your algebra teacher about sex. Like, it's just me. You probably won't see me unless you access our services. Though I have had students then come in and have an appointment with me and be like, I was like, I warned you, I told you I might do your appointment. I don't know what to tell you. Marissa.
Yes, the fun aunt seated next to you.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just going to say that
I think this is a great case for existing partnerships and sustaining partnerships between public health, ESDs, school districts, because, you know, for me, I've been in my position for 3 years, and so I have relationships with teachers, with administrators, and have built that trust over time where you can come into the classroom, you recognize the kids, and have worked with them for a number of years at this point. And so I think that really helps create that safety with the students and with the staff too, because, you know, it's a vulnerable thing to hand over your classroom to somebody else, even for an hour. And so I think it's super important to just like keep showing up. I try to get out to every single one of my schools at least once a month. It gets really hard because we've got like 100 schools. But I think, yeah, the more partnerships and relationships we can create to support students and teachers, the better it is for everyone.
I would. Good. Okay. I would echo the relationship piece. Anne with Planned Parenthood, who runs the Teen Council program. You know, when someone comes into my classroom and speaks, I'm responsible for what comes out of their mouth, and so I trust Anne. I've known Anne for a long time, and so whoever she brings in, kid-wise, to speak to our students, I know that they've been trained. I know that they've been vetted and figured out, and so I have full trust that Anne's going to put the right people in place to speak to the kids in our class.
So just to say, Anne is Ann Cryer. Many of you know her. She's at Planned Parenthood. But that model that Woodburn has, bringing in Planned Parenthood, is not a model that we see elsewhere. We don't see that here because Salem-Keizer School District doesn't allow it at this point. And it's not by any stretch of the imagination accepted in other areas. So you are actually a model in having the Teen Council and having Planned Parenthood come in. Yeah.
Any other, yes?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Lindsay Weaver. I'm with the Oregon Health Authority Public Health Division. And you mentioned Anne. Anne previously had worked for the local county public health and had a long-standing history and relationship with the schools. And I think the key thing that we're here all connecting together is relationships. Relationships are really important, especially when you're working in community. One thing I wanted to bring up too is I think a lot in terms of structure and how things are funded and how we get funding to have ongoing, consistent help with sexual health education. I work a lot on federal funds, and I'm really interested and curious what Marissa's, their funding structure in Lane County. There's a will. People, you all want to do this work. We all want to do this work. A lot of folks are in support of it. It's just having that consistent structure and funding in place, built upon relationships. The work I do is for young people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and sexual health. And our program is growing faster than we can support with our flat-funded federal rates that we've had since 2011. And so that's been really frustrating for us as well, as thinking about how funding is not growing, but instead shrinking because of inflation and all of that. Folks in juvenile justice, we've done work with them, and the Oregon youth authorities are interested as well, and so it's looking for funds for those folks. They're interested, they're asking us, and we're trying to connect them with community organizations, community-based organizations, and folks that can do that work. So glad to have this discussion with you all, and yeah, let's continue.
Yes.
I have to piggyback on that. There are lots of school nurses throughout the state, not as many as we would like. We need more teachers. as well. So I'm self-advocating, but I work alongside teachers. But I will tell you that the 18 to 21-year-old population with special needs is huge. And they need sex ed, and they need it in a very special way. And I know Sasha is incredible with that, and I'm just really happy that you said that, because I hadn't thought about it until you said it. And we have one nurse who serves that whole population in Salem-Keizer School District, and it's a big population. And she says every year, oh my goodness, these kids need to know how their bodies work and what they can do or can't or shouldn't do. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Leah Haas, and I work for the Oregon Department of Human Services. This has been a great event, and I have really absorbed so much, so I just want to thank you. I just wanted to put in a little plug for the My Future, My Choice program, which is administered by the Oregon Department of Human Services. And we are a program that is funded through federal funding. And we support 10 sub-grantees across the state, actually soon to be 12. And we are a peer education curriculum for 6th graders. And it's a curriculum that was Oregon developed and written to the health education standards for Oregon. And we just rolled out an 8th grade curriculum this past December. And we actually have a training coming up. So if anybody's looking for educator training on this 8th grade curriculum, which is free. Both our 6th grade curriculum and our 8th grade curriculum are free. Please come talk to me, also my colleagues over at the other table, Austin and Elizabeth, because we'd love to get more educators trained in our 8th grade curriculum, which also covers core sex ed skills in addition to the 8th grade curriculum. And our 6th grade program is a peer education model. So we're always looking to recruit teens to deliver our 6th grade curriculum, as well as teens to join our teen advisory board. So just wanted to share those resources with you, and we're always looking to train new folks and offer our free curriculum to whoever is interested. Thank you.
Kind of a little interesting aside, as we were trying to organize this event, we couldn't figure out what's this Department of Human Services involved in this for, and what. And one of the colleagues, I think from ODE, said, "Well, funding. They applied for the grant and got the grant. So, thankfully, you did, and let us all try to take maximum advantage of it." Yeah. So I think that's a reminder. We have your questionnaire to fill out, and if you have some thoughts that you weren't able to share with us live, please do note them. Over to Joyce.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Thank you, Brad. Just to say, in this room is just, you all know this, just an incredible amount of dedicated people, just as Sasha has said, and a lot of passion. And we want, for all of us, to be able to share resources and whatnot. And this division of labor is confusing to me, coming from a different part of the country where you have human services working on one part of the curriculum, and then you have OHA working on another, and then ODE trying to wrap. It's complicated, even for a university professor. I can only imagine how it is for just people out in the community. And then the other thing I want to say is, we have incredible resources. I know Sasha and Laura have worked so hard with the new standards that will be coming out, as Sasha said, in fall 2025. And they are improved in the sense that they're also a little bit simpler to understand, I think, for teachers moving forward. But they're 1.5 people over at the Oregon Department of Education, and I think it's up to all of us to help spread the word that there are new standards coming out. And also the website, the Oregon Department of Education website, has a lot of fantastic
resources for folks. So one of the things that we consistently heard from teachers around, at least Marion and Polk counties, is that they don't feel like they have enough resources. They're not supported enough. ODE isn't coming to them. People don't realize necessarily out in the community that there's so few people at the ODE to be able to do this. So I think we can all help with that. To spread the word. And also what human services are, what we just heard is absolutely enormous and important. So we can all spread these messages. So this particular symposium, as you can see, was filmed. And our goal with this is to have an edited version to be available to all of you, to be able to share or utilize in any way that you like. We're also probably going to have a transcript available, but that'll take a little time. And then last, and really importantly, we would love for you to take 10 minutes and just fill out those surveys in your pockets, as Brad has just said, in your envelopes, so that we can share the ideas. And then we are thinking about holding a larger kind of meeting of sorts to delve into a little bit more deeply some of the ideas. We've talked about structural ideas, school-based ideas, public health specific ideas, human services specific ideas, the ESDs. We have a lot of different specific ideas and the possibility of legislative fixes for some of this. So if we put together all of your ideas and then gather together again, and then with the host of other people who you will write on your survey who should be at the table, perhaps we can together, collectively, intersectorially, sort of chip away at some of the problems that we currently have in making sure that all Oregon students are educated in this way, okay? So 10 minutes, and thank you so much for coming. Thank you very, very much to our panelists, and of course to Senator Deb Patterson and Senator Claire Wilson. We're so grateful for your time here today. Thank you.